They're not related.
Hi, FEMA. Can you test your mic to see if we can hear you and you can hear us?
Hey, good morning. Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing 1, 2. We hear you 5 by 5.
So you're gonna be the player. Correct? Yes. What we're gonna do in the exercise, we're gonna do a AWS, a brief at the beginning, so what you sent me, if you wanna have Garcia.
Hi, Peter. Can you test your mic to see if we can hear you?
Hey, Brandon's here in the room with me. Can you hear us?
We can hear you, FEMA.
Thanks. I think he's why are you in twice?
Holidays, so we do.
Peter, if you can test your mic before the meeting, that would be great. Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, so what I'm
Hey, this FEMA Region 4, on the screen, the Peter Helios is actually, John Brogan, FCO John Brogan, we believe.
Nope, I'm dialed in separately.
Nice to meet you.
We got you, but you're coming in under my name, SEO Brogan. You may just need to change it on Zoom.
That's a negative, that's right.
Sorry, I thought Peter was on separately. I'll change it right now.
Thanks.
and updates from each of the very, very relevant agencies and teams that help make sure that we can keep Floridians safe and know, particularly from my vantage point as a senior member of the Appropriations Committee, to really get a sense of the impact of the funding that we provide from Congress, particularly to the federal agencies, to NOAA, to the National Weather Service, FEMA, to the Army Corps. We make decisions based on, what we are hearing works. And so it's been remarkable over the years and the arc, and I've really done this hurricane briefing my entire career in Congress. It's been remarkable to see the progress and the ability that we have to notify people much further in advance because of the investments that we've made, because of technological developments, because of the expertise that we have that is really invaluable. So I first want to thank you all for your remarkable work, because without you, it would be far more difficult for us to keep our constituents safe and for us to be able to do the kind of cleanup and recovery that is so essential in the aftermath of storms. Storms which we know, without a doubt, hit our community. That's why we're nicknamed Hurricane Alley. So, Commissioner Mosey, thank you so much for joining me this morning. Thank you for having me. Commissioner Mosey is a city commissioner in the city of a city that I have represented throughout my entire legislative career, all the way back to my days as a member of the State House and the State Senate. Do you want to make a opening remark?
You said it all. I mean, unfortunately, we don't know when they're going to hit. We don't know how powerful they are. At the last minute, they can take a turn, and we think we're in the clear, and we're not. And as a municipality, we prepare for the worst, hope for the best, and we just have absolutely no idea. And we are always at the mercy of the winds and the hurricanes. So, whatever you can tell us and any information you can give us to help us prepare and help our residents, we will take and we will be grateful for. Thank you. And thank you for this, because again, anything you can do and any information, any funding, anything.
Yeah,
we will
exactly.
take.
Right. That safety net that these folks help provide, we weave together as tightly as possible is so critical. So thank you so much to everyone once again. And do you want me to begin with you, Dr. Malia?
No, I go in your.
Okay, good. We usually start with Noah, and we're joined. Well, for purposes of introduction, we'll go around. Obviously, I'm Devin Watson.
Good morning, I'm Mike Brennan, I'm the director of the NOAA's National Hurricane Center.
Robert Morieta, meteorologist in charge, National Weather Service, Miami Forecast Office.
Alden English, City Civil Affairs Manager, Florida Power Line.
I'm Paula Prendergast. I'm the Executive Director for the American Red Cross Broward County Chapter.
Jesse Sparrow, Assistant Director of the Miami-Dade County Department of Emergency.
Good morning, everyone. Clay Pacheco, Director of the Office of Emergency Management, Broward County.
Gus Alaka, Director of Hurricane Research Division at AOML.
Lisa Malozzi, Commissioner, Cooper City.
Wonderful. Okay, so the order that I have is we'll start with Dr. Brennan from the National Hurricane Center.
Good morning, thank you all for the invitation here and for being here today. Just want to start off with a little bit of a look back at what we faced in the 2024 hurricane season. It was extremely busy with 18 named storms, 11 hurricanes, 5 of those major hurricanes, and most importantly, we had 5 U.S. hurricane landfalls, 3 of those here in Florida. On the West Coast, Debbie and Helene made landfall very close to the same location.
At least it was spelled differently.
The big region, yes. With Milton making landfall just south of Tampa Bay, but all 3 produced significant impacts statewide, including here in South Florida, especially for both Helene and the tornado outbreak in Milton. In terms of fatalities, damage, this is one of the most impactful hurricane seasons we've had in many years, with about 360 fatalities across the United States. 250 of those from Helene. Get into some of the causes of the fatalities in recent years and trends about direct and indirect fatalities and what we can learn from that. In terms of damage in the United States, there was $124 billion in damage in the U.S. last year, with more than half of that from Hurricane Helene. And if you look at the map of the seasonal activity, you'll see a A lot of the activity was concentrated in the western part of the basin. We had a lot of storms forming and developing and making landfall within just a few days. Both Helene and Milton in particular formed it and reached Florida within less than 5 days, and in Helene's case, less than 4. If we step back and look at this era we've been in going back to 2017, it's been exceptionally busy. The map you see here are the tracks of all 25 hurricanes that have made landfall in the United States since 2017. That includes 11 major hurricanes, category 3 through 5 on the Saffir-Simpson hurricane scale. 8 of those hurricane landfalls have occurred in Florida. 5 of those major hurricane landfalls, including, and we also had additionally impacts from Hurricane Sally that made landfall on the Alabama coast, brought significant impacts to the Florida Panhandle. You can see the vast majority of these hurricane landfalls have occurred in Florida or along the Gulf Coast, with a couple along the East Coast as well. In terms of fatalities during this time period, we've seen about 660 direct fatalities, 560 indirect or largely after the storm deaths. This does not include the impacts from Maria in Puerto Rico. And in Florida, unfortunately, has been one of the states hardest hit by both the hurricanes themselves and also in terms of the fatality numbers, with about over 400 fatalities. Break that down a little bit more in just a minute. And over $800 billion in damage, more than $100 billion per year to the United States. Here's an overall look at tropical cyclone fatality trends in the United States as a whole over the last 11 years or so. On the left, we're looking at the direct fatalities, which are those directly caused by the forces of the storm itself. And the story continues to be that it's largely the water that is the biggest hazard. Across the United States, freshwater flooding has been responsible for more than half of the fatalities, followed by surf and rip currents, storm surge, and then also wind. We had a lot of wind fatalities last year with Helene, largely well inland, but that number has ticked up, and wind's now been responsible for about 20% of the fatalities. But I want to draw your attention to the diagram on the right side. We've lost almost as many people to these so-called indirect fatalities, which largely occur after the storm, especially in the aftermath of major hurricanes where we have widespread power outages. And you can see that, looks like we have a pop-up box that's popped up on the screen there. Start. But the indirect fatalities are spread across a variety of causes. They range from car accidents to just preparation and cleanup recovery accidents, carbon monoxide poisoning from improper generator use, cardiac arrest, heat fatalities, and just a lack of medical access. So largely, these are largely skewed towards older portions of the population that are less resilient to the aftermath of these significant storms. If we take a look at Florida, Florida's fatality trends are somewhat different, because if you look at the pie chart here in Florida, of the 135 or so direct deaths we've seen, almost half of them have been to storm surge, which is really a very different trend than we see in the rest of the country. More than half of these fatalities were in Lee County due to Hurricane Ian. But Florida has been unusually affected with storm surge fatalities over the last several years. But again, considering the number of hurricane landfalls, overall storm surge mortality has been greatly decreased due to a lot of effort to improve our warnings and messaging and information about storm surge that has led to more effective and timely evacuations. The rest of the fatality trends in Florida are mostly due to wind, freshwater flooding from heavy rainfall, or surf and rip current fatalities.
What do you attribute those reductions to?
For storm surge? I think it's been a decades-long investment to improve storm surge modeling that goes all the way back to certainly after Katrina in 2005. If you recall, back in that era, we didn't have a specific warning that highlighted areas at risk of storm surge inundation. We introduced that in 2017, so we're able to specifically highlight areas that could see that life-threatening inundation, so people get a wireless emergency alert on their phone. It's meant to help reinforce the evacuation decisions that are made by local emergency managers. We also have our real-time storm surge modeling now going out 3 days into the future, and our forecasts are better. We're better able to anticipate the track and the rapid intensification of some of these storms, so that improves the forecast of those hazards.
And how did we get to the point where those forecasts are able to be better, and that we have those products that you're mentioning that notify people of the potential storms?
Yeah, as I mentioned, it's a decades-long investment, all the way from scientific research, through things like the Hurricane Research Division, the Hurricane Forecast Improvement Project, which contributed to the development of our regional hurricane models and improvements and being able to actually forecast rapid intensification. Those are forecasts we never would have made 5 or 10 years ago. We didn't have the guidance or the confidence to do it. And now we're making much more aggressive intensity forecasts. So it takes a long time to get that research into tools that we can then use at the Hurricane Center to get downstream into the products and services.
And can you give me a sense of the impact on the reductions in force, the terminations, the cuts to funding, and the impact that that could potentially have on your ability to forecast to the degree of specificity that has resulted in fewer deaths, and how we can make sure that that progress continues?
Yeah, I think the main message is that, at the Hurricane Center, we're fully capable and operational this season, but we're able now to use and take advantage of the tools that have benefited from that continuous investment. So we want to continue to make progress and get better. We're still not perfect. We need to continue that investment in funding things like modeling, research and development, observations, satellites, buoys, all that kind of important foundational data that really goes through the entire forecast.
So with the cuts that have been made thus far, and the reduction in force, terminations and all the attrition and retirements that have been encouraged, are those going to impact our future ability to improve forecasting and the investments reduced and the paring back of personnel? Is that likely to impact our ability to improve forecasts in the future?
It's hard to say. I can't speak to certain staffing situations or decisions that have been made, but I can reemphasize.
And I know those aren't your responsibility.
And I can reemphasize that what we've made, the progress we've made thus far has benefited from continued investment.
Okay, thank you.
Question, in reference to the previous slide, you had carbon monoxide as a cause of death. So if people were to have the carbon monoxide alarms in their homes, very simple, but would that preclude them from dying if that would have gone off? Because that's battery operated. So even if they were running a generator, they had no power, the battery would have gone off and that would have alerted them that they were getting it in their home.
I think absolutely that would be an important thing for people to maintain and have, especially if they plan on running a generator. So that's certainly a safety mechanism that could be beneficial.
So something as a municipality, I can ask my fire departments to try and look and alert our residents to.
Yes, absolutely. And it's really important to message these post-storm fatality and the post-storm dangers ahead of the storm itself, because after a storm, it's difficult to reach people. We're changing our messaging to get to some of these indirect fatalities in advance of the storm's arrival, focusing in on, you'll see some work we're doing on post-storm heat messaging this year, but these are the indirect fatalities in Florida. Florida has had more indirect fatalities than just about any other state put together over this 11-year time period, almost 300. And again, it's spread across this variety of causes. Largely disproportionately affects adults over 60 that are in a vulnerable state in these storms. So looking ahead to the 2025 hurricane season, this is NOAA's seasonal forecast. It came out last week. We are expecting an above normal season, a 60% chance of above normal activity within the basin, and our forecast ranges are 13 to 19 named storms or systems that at least reach tropical storm strength. 6 to 10 of those becoming hurricanes, and expecting 3 to 5 of those to become major hurricanes. So the low end of those forecast ranges is about at normal levels, but you can see it's either going to be probably normal to above normal with only a 10% chance of below normal activity.
And last season, was that also
above normal? Yes, across the board, storms, hurricanes, major hurricanes as well. These are the list of the names for the season so far. At this point, I can tell you the next 7 days look quiet. Those are our tropical weather outlooks. So that gets us into June. But the first storm will be Andrea this year, down the list. In terms of the sort of overall scene setting that's going to happen for the season, we've been in a high activity era now for about the last 30 years, going back to the mid-1990s. And the background conditions that have driven that are warm ocean temperatures or warmer than normal ocean temperatures across the tropical Atlantic. And expected to continue this year, not as warm as last year, which was record breaking, but warm as well this year. below average vertical wind shear, so less change of wind speed and direction with height, which tends to tear storms apart when they develop. We're not expecting a lot of that this year. More activity across West Africa in terms of rainfall that will result in stronger tropical waves that are the seedling disturbances for most of the hurricanes that develop in the deep tropics, and weaker easterly low-level winds, which all sort of result in an overall favorable environment across the Atlantic being developed region. And it's important to emphasize that the vast majority of the hurricane activity happens in this August, September, October timeframe. In fact, the most vulnerable time for us in South Florida is in that late season, October period. The other big factor this year is we're not expecting El Nino to be present. El Nino during this active era has served as a way to impede some of these favorable conditions. We're in a neutral phase, and that's expected to continue through the hurricane season. So there really won't be that breaking factor on these overall favorable conditions.
When you say it impact these improved conditions.
They're favorable, yeah. So
favorable conditions, as in if the El Nino is not present, it's more likely storms will be stronger.
Yeah, more likely there'll be more activity.
Yeah.
So with El Nino tends to
thought it was the
increase.
opposite.
No, yes.
I don't speak weather.
Yeah.
So.
So when you have El Nino, you tend to have stronger upper level westerly winds across the deep tropics, which impede storm development. That's not going to be present this year. So without that, these other sort of ocean and atmospheric factors will drive the activity for the most part. And that's why we're expecting an above normal season. But again, our message is always that regardless of how much activity there is, everybody in South Florida in particular has to be ready every year. We're vulnerable the entire hurricane season, all the way from June through November. And as I mentioned, even late in the season is some of our highest risk. To show some demonstration of our forecast improvements over the years, what you're looking at on the left is our average track forecast error by decade. You can see very steady progress over the last 30 to 40 years. Our average track forecast error now is less than 200 miles out 5 days in advance. Compare that to 25 years ago, it was almost 300 to 400 miles. But the big story is on the right-hand side. You can see this is our intensity error. How strong are the storms going to be? You can see very little progress was made from the 1970s through the 2000s. But in the last 15 to 20 years, we've made significant improvements in improving our intensity forecasts of storms, as I mentioned, about improved modeling, improved ability to forecast rapid strengthening. You can see at 3 days out, our average intensity error now is down to about 10 miles per hour, whereas 20 years ago it was 20 to 25 miles per hour. So significant improvements have been made there. Here's an example. This is Helene last year that went from a 35 mile per hour disturbance, not even a tropical depression yet, to a Category 4 hurricane in 84 hours. This was one of the most aggressive intensity forecasts the Hurricane Center has ever made. It was the first time we had forecast the system on the left, which wasn't even a tropical depression, to become a major hurricane within that, actually in this case, within about 3 days. And so that's what I talk about. We're able now to anticipate some of these rapid changes. This is a forecast we never would have made 5 or 10 years ago. We would have probably forecast a strong tropical storm or maybe something that was right at hurricane intensity. Rob can testify to that too, and Gus. We now have tools that enable us to make a lot more aggressive forecasts.
Now with the funding being cut, do you still have those tools?
Those tools as they exist now continue to, we still have the tools we have. We just need to make sure that we continue to make improvements, because as this graph shows, we're not perfect. When we have rapid intensification now, our 1 day forecast error is off by about 15 to 20 miles per hour.
That's a lot.
But 15 years ago, we were off by 30 miles per hour. So we've cut that about 45%, but still a lot of room to improve.
And that's really directly because of the investments that have been made over time.
Absolutely. Hurricane Hunter aircraft, getting observations into the storm, getting those observations into the forecast models like HWRF and HAVS have really paid dividends. So what we're doing new for 2025 at the Hurricane Center, this is actually something continued from last year. We had an experimental version of our cone graphic that shows the inland tropical storm and hurricane watches and warnings. We're very glad we had that last year, because this is an example from Helene where you can see almost the entire state of Florida covered by tropical storm or hurricane warnings, well into Georgia and the Western Carolinas. This will continue in experimental form this year to, again, gather comments and feedback and be able to make improvements to that. Rip current risk. We're going to debut a rip current risk viewer map on hurricanes.gov this year to help highlight the risk of rip currents associated with tropical storms and hurricanes. These are forecasts that come out of local National Weather Service offices like the one here in Miami, but this is a way to have a sort of a national or regional view of that. And Florida has had the most hurricane rip current related fatalities of any other state going back to 2013, almost 20. Talking about lead time and
It says people are going.
largely, and one of the biggest threats is storms that are well off the East Coast, maybe 1,000 miles away, generating dangerous ocean conditions on an otherwise nice day to go to the beach locally. But that's why there's warning flags and swim near lifeguards, and we put out these rip current forecasts to make really trying to do a better job of raising that awareness. Speaking of lead times, so we introduced this concept of what we call potential tropical cyclones back in 2017, and allows us to get forecasts and warnings out for systems like Helene that were not even yet a tropical depression, but could bring hazards within 2 or 3 days to land areas. So this year, we're going to extend that lead time for those out to 72 hours in advance for high confidence of significant wind and storm surge impacts to land areas. So we'll be able to get that forecast information out even sooner. And then I do want to finally touch on post-storm heat risk. We're working with our partners at the Weather Prediction Center to highlight areas at risk of heat impacts after a storm. So we're going to be working with them to identify areas where there could be power loss by looking at our probabilities of getting strong winds, and then overlaying that with the heat risk mapping that the Weather Prediction Center provides, and see where those intersect, so that before a storm happens, we can start highlighting, okay, after the storm, there's going to be the potential for significant heat in this area where there could be loss of power and loss of air conditioning to try to get that post-storm town.
Yeah, I mean, I noticed that within our recent hurricanes, we've had cyclones in neighborhoods.
Tornadoes, yes.
Tornadoes,
Yes.
not cyclones, tornadoes in neighborhoods that sort of came out of nowhere. And I don't recall maybe conventional storms.
Yeah, Milton in particular was a prolific producer of tornadoes, and almost every hurricane, when it makes landfall, has the potential for tornadoes to form, especially out away from the center in those outer rain bands. You may touch on this a little bit, Rob, in your talk, but Milton unfortunately had a real potent combination of ingredients that came together that resulted in a very large tornado outbreak over the southern part of the Florida Peninsula, and resulted in fatalities up in St. Lucie County. And there were unusually strong and long track tornadoes for hurricane associated systems. That's all I have. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much. Any more questions?
All that, and this is South Florida, so it should all be purple and dark red.
Well, to be fair, the heat risk is really localized. So what triggers a high level of heat risk in Florida will be different than what happens in Minnesota. So it is sort of tuned to the climatology of the area relative to the heat that people.
It is, but if we're dealing with
Power
and we
outages,
have
yes,
no power,
absolutely.
then we're dealing with, it's 90 outside and it's also 90 inside. So
That's right.
we're all purple.
Yeah, and that's what we're trying to look at here, is how to intersect the power risk with the heat itself.
Okay, well,
I'm
thank you.
gonna take your photos, just looking like you talking, you're looking.
That's how we'll message.
Oh,
Yeah, I'm seeing Dr. Brennan, you're talking.
Yeah, that's how we'll message the heat risk.
Okay.
Perfect.
That's how we'll work.
No, you could do that while we're.
I got my direction, you know.
Just a reminder that this is being live streamed, so that is in front of everybody, but something to say. Glad to confirm. Glad to confirm.
We're human, we're not perfect.
Right, exactly, definitely not. I'll never be a TV star.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. Dr. Gus Alaka,
Yes, ma'am.
no A on no.
Very nice to meet you and glad to be here. Yeah, so Mike, thank you for that great introduction and talking obviously about the forecast, the impacts, very important stuff. You know, I sit at the Atlantic Oceanographic and Meteorological Laboratory, AOML, I'm in the Hurricane Research Division, and we've really prided ourselves on working really closely in an applied research sense with the Hurricane Center and other parts of the Weather Service to make sure that we are transitioning tools and products and services that can help improve hurricane forecasting and improve lives. So that's sort of the context of what I'm going to talk to you about today. So why is NOAA's research so important? Well, first, let me just share that our mission is to monitor, understand, and predict hurricanes to improve society and to protect life, property, and commerce from extreme hazards. So what I'm showing here are trends, and Mike showed a version of this. Let's see if I can. Okay, no laser there, but on the left is the intensity trend error for hurricane forecasts from 2007 to 2022. We chose 2007 because that was the start of the Hurricane Forecast Improvement Project, which Mike had brought up earlier. It's now the the Improvement Program. HFIP is what we call it. And in that time frame, you can see all those different colored lines represent the intensity forecast at different lead times: 24, 48, 72, 96, and 120. All of them, they have year-to-year wiggles, but the trend lines shown by those dashed lines are down, and they improve. You know, the forecast errors came down by about 50% in this time frame. On the right,
error trend has come down.
that's right. Yes. Sorry, I said the intensity. Yes, the error trend, the errors have come down 50%. The forecasts have improved by double. So
Just the non-weather expert English.
yes, actually, you were correct to call me out on that. I didn't say that. No, that was good. That was good. I have to find my P's and Q's here. So on the right is the reduction in track error from 2007 to 2024, where you can see that rain representing how far off the forecast could be if the storm was supposed to be in the center. And you can see that in 2024, these are much lower. And so why am I showing this? Well, we have contributed heavily to these improvements over the years. And this is really important because what's the value of this? Like, what's the return on the investment? So there's been some really interesting studies that we have participated and collaborated. This one is led by someone at the University of Miami, Renato Molina. And what he's showing here is that you get a high return on the forecast where you save about $2 billion per storm when it makes landfall, right? The entire cost of HFIP, that program, since 2007 is $300 million, right? The total damages, that top line number there, since 2007, those are all the storms on the left that went into this, about $60 billion in avoided damages. And from talking to Renato, this is not even the total picture, but it paints at least part of the picture in terms of
This is because $2 billion per storm, approximately, from improved error forecasting.
That is correct. That is correct. So it's remarkable. And again, the return on investment is really something that's a highlight there. So how do we conduct our hurricane research? Well, oversimplifying it, we really break it down into two camps. Our observations on the left is a really nice picture of all of our different observing systems that we use and deploy year after year to collect state-of-the-art data that goes in front of the forecasters and also makes it into the numerical models to make those forecasts better as well. And so there's a whole myriad of different platforms and instruments. The airplane there is our P3 aircraft, and we drop a number of expendables out of that aircraft. We also have a number of uncrewed systems that we deploy from the air, and we also deploy from the ground as well. These could be drones that are flying through the air, uncrewed surface vehicles like the sail drone that's shown there that we've done some work with, and also gliders and other subsurface vehicles. So we're really covering everything from the atmosphere to the ocean surface, even trying to get below the ocean surface as well. And we sort of collate, assimilate all of this data together and figure out how to make the forecast better. On the right is just a snapshot of our modeling efforts, where the blue boxes there are actually showing this innovative technology called a moving nest. It's been around for a long, long time, but we're constantly, we developed it at AOML actually, and we're constantly trying to improve it. So here we're showing that if you can think of them like magnifying glasses, that way you zoom in and get high definition on the storm. You can see we're putting magnifying glasses over several storms to improve those forecasts.
So you're seeing how well the eye is actually formed and whether or not it has something seriously worrying.
That's right. Yeah. And it helps us because we're trying to be cost effective, because if we were to try to simulate the entire North Atlantic at really high resolution, it'd probably be a good forecast, but it'd be really expensive. We couldn't get the forecast out on time for the forecasters at the Hurricane Center and elsewhere to actually use. So this is a way to get the forecasters what they need and try to be as efficient as we can.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Absolutely.
Did the buoys that are installed all over the country contribute to improving those forecasts?
I can't say specifically because I haven't done that data impact study, but that data is available and it is assimilated into the models.
Because I know NOAA uses like 90 buoys around the country, and a number of them have been shut off.
I will say
one off the coast of Florida, which is that in Hollywood? Are you familiar?
I'm not familiar which one has been.
Yeah, might be one off of Cape Canaveral.
Cape Canaveral,
Yeah.
okay. Has that one been shut off?
There was one that's been shut off for a for quite a while. And I know there's maybe one in the Gulf too, but I can't remember exactly which one, but yeah, recently there've been a couple, at least in the areas, waters around Florida or near Florida.
Okay,
They're not active.
so if they're not active, I know Dr. Brennan mentioned that, not continuing to invest, we have what we need now because we've made progress up to this point as a result of the previous investments. But if we're actually shutting off buoys, is that going to affect our forecasting ability and the support necessary to help make sure that current hurricane season that we're in is, we have all the information we need? I mean, if there's 2 buoys that are shut off the coast of Florida, is that potentially a problem?
I will defer to the
asking
forecast. I think it's important from a situational awareness standpoint for sure, at the very least.
Yeah. I would echo that, but I will also echo what Mike said regarding the improvements that have been made at this time. Those tools are still there, and we're still going to utilize them to the maximum capacity, coupled with our staffing, coupled with our 24/7 operations.
But if current products that we have in use that are deployed, like the buoys, are turned off, then how are we going to benefit from those?
Yeah, I mean,
And I want to just make sure I underscore, those are not decisions that anyone here is making. But I do this briefing so we can understand the impact of investments previously made, what we are looking forward to, and of course, make sure people understand what they need to prepare for the current season.
yeah, ocean observations are really valuable because otherwise it's a pretty significant data point there. So I know there have been some buoys that have gone adrift recently. There's also an annual cruise that NOAA takes to go fix buoys so they can be out for a little while, but I don't have specifics on the buoys you're asking about. We can follow up.
Okay, but there are some that have been intentionally turned off, from what I understand. Is that correct?
I'm not aware of buoys,
I'm
but
not aware of that.
there were some seaman stations along the coast, these coastal towers that got deactivated because of deterioration of the
Yeah.
facility itself, and those were turned off in the last couple of years.
Okay,
That may be what you're
If
referring
you-
to. We can follow up.
yeah, if you could follow up with me, that would be really helpful. Thank you.
Can I ask a question in reference to, and I'm gonna direct it towards you, and I'm not sure if this is the proper person. So I'm looking at all the resources that you have. And again, I'm without a doubt, the biggest layperson out of everybody here, and I apologize for my ineptitude, but when I look at everything that you're using to configure all of your data, when I hear a buoy being turned off, so you have a moored buoy, you have a drifter, you have a spotter buoy, what does each offer in reference to data? Can you tell me that?
Yeah, well, if I were to tell you about each of the instruments, we could be here for a couple of
Yeah,
hours.
okay, so
But I can summarize though,
Yeah.
because really with all these instruments, the analogy I like to use is that the hurricane's like a donut. And before flying through the storm without like much expendables and other instruments, it was like putting a toothpick through the donut, right? As we add these other instruments and these other capabilities, it's like we're taking a bite out of the donut now. So each of these instruments are specialized at viewing the storm in a certain way. It's like a different lens that looking at the storm. And so when you sort of combine all that data together, it usually creates a more holistic picture, a more complete understanding of what's happening. So yes, each one has its own specialized data set that sort of fits into the big picture. And AOML plays a really big role in terms of figuring out how all of that fits together. Fits together in terms of tools and products that we put right directly in front of the forecasters, and also in this sort of thing we call data simulation of how all this fits into a numerical model, and so that we can get the best possible forecast.
So it gives you the complete photo.
Yeah, and it's not, I wish it was as easy as like you just collect the data and like throw it in a box and then like out comes this better forecast, but there is a lot of really important science that goes into how do we want to adapt our observing strategies, the patterns that the planes are flying. Where do we want to put these instruments relative to being on the right side or the left side of the storm, for example? There's all these different considerations that we can provide this information to get even better. I really think like you had brought it up, Congresswoman, about what's the potential impact of the swing. What I do feel comfortable saying is if we were to shut off this effort, the observing effort, we would easily degrade off the bat by about 20% in terms of what the numerical models can provide. And that is going to feed back, I don't know the number, but it's going to feed back on the forecasters, what's officially coming out of the hurricane side.
That's what we're at.
If we continue to improve this effort, which we are on the track to continue, we've been doing that over the last several years, I think we can see a swing up to 20% the other direction, right? And so we're really talking about, okay, are we status quo? Are we reducing capabilities, or are we continuing on the pathway that we can actually continue to actualize a lot of these improvements that we're doing?
So you're saying a 20% degradation or improvement in either direction, depending on whether we're going to be in status quo or no longer use these products or continue to invest to advance.
Yep. Or if they go away, then that's the degradation part. If we were to not be able to, fly these Hurricane Hunter missions, collect that critical data. This is something that we're constantly weighing as we balance, all of our goals.
Right, because earlier, I believe it was, maybe Dr. Brennan had said that storms can be off or are off now by 15 miles. But earlier in history, they were off by 30. So now when we lose a buoy or two, then we're off by, we can now increase what we can be off by because we're losing that critical component.
That's right. If you lose data, yeah, you can.
So
you can. I'm not saying you guarantee it, but you
No,
can swing in the other
but it's
direction.
something, right? So
Absolutely.
we're going back instead of moving forward.
Absolutely, the risk for that is.
That's what I thought. Okay, thank you. I apologize.
No, you're. All right, I'll move along here. So these are just some numbers. No, this is great. This is a summary of our 2024 Hurricane Field Program effort. This is what is also known as the Hurricane Hunter effort. We work in close coordination across the community with the Hurricane Center, even with the Air Force in terms of sharing what our patterns are and what our strategies are, and of course the Aircraft Operations Center at the Office of Marine and Aviation Operations, OMAO. So we all work together to sort of figure out how can we collect all this data. And HRD at AOML, jargony, Hurricane Research Division at AOML, our lab, we really pride ourselves on putting together an experimental plan to drive research priorities that we can learn more about how these storms work and transition what we learn over into operations. So last year, just a couple of stats here that stand out. We ended up flying and supporting missions into 8 tropical cyclones. We ended up flying, supporting 67 missions between the P3 and G4 aircraft. A lot of those involved personnel on the aircraft to make sure that the data is actually being quality controlled and transmitted correctly. But it also involves a lot of ground support. And we also, I think I have a little flag here. There we go. So AOML, provides the support for operational and research missions, which is really important to note here. So, like I said, we're all in it together. So all the operational data is quality controlled and transmitted in real time. AOML participates in that. And we conduct our research with all the data that we collect, even on operational missions, to drive even more forecast improvements. We look at things like how is the vortex tilting over in wind shear, which Mike brought up earlier, is something that can sort of squash those storms and prevent them from.
Before you move on real quick, because this is really, you can see the impact of the Hurricane Hunters. I was part of a group of members that fought in the emergency supplemental to get funding for additional Hurricane Hunters. So critical, as we've talked about this morning. When are those planes going to be ready to fly into storms?
Yeah, some are on the production line. I think Mike might have a better estimate, but I think within the next couple of years, we expect one of the C-130s to be ready.
The G550, the new high altitude jet, should be available next year.
Okay.
I think the C-130s that are sort of the next generation replace the P3s, I think in the 2030. Right. They're in progress. There's 2 of them. So.
I just think it's important to really underscore how much we appreciate all of your expertise, NOAA, the Weather Service, the professionals that keep us safe, including the incredible women in the back who are part of this stalwart team. You help save people's lives before they're ever at risk and prevent people from losing their lives. And so I just don't think that you get enough appreciation. And I know it is always a difficult and stressful time. You literally have people's lives, and I'm sure you feel that pressure in your hands and hanging in the balance. And so I just want you to know how much you're appreciated.
I'm glad you brought up the new aircraft, actually, because I can make the point on this slide even. So yeah, we're figuring out how to use the current aircraft as optimally as we can, but we're thinking ahead to the future as well. We're starting to engage with the Hurricane Center and other folks in terms of how can we translate what we've learned with the P3, G4 aircraft into the next generation. And there's a lot that we can learn from what we've done, but there are some areas that we're going to have to explore and figure out how to best use those aircraft there's been a very significant investment in them. And so, we're prepared to help follow through to make sure that we're using them as best as we possibly can. So that's part of our goal as well. We are
Very
thinking about
excited
it.
that we're able to make that happen.
Yeah. All right, and the last one I'll make over here on the right column are the aircraft instruments. I mean, there's a whole array of instruments, over 1,400 dropsondes. These are the instruments that come out of the belly of the aircraft and measure temperature, humidity, pressure, winds all the way to the surface. We have our tail Doppler radar, which is doing a CAT scan of the storm. We also have some really cool drone deployments. The Black Swift, we had 17 of these drones that were able to go and fly around in the eye wall, places you would never want a crewed aircraft to go, but critical data. So we're at the forefront.
And I'm gonna stop, I don't want to keep interrupting you, but I know you used the word cool. And it is super cool, but also super important.
Yeah.
We cannot allow anyone to have the impression that these are toys, that these are things that are, neat extras that aren't necessary. All of that equipment has and will continue to help us improve forecasting and save people's lives.
Well put. Yes, absolutely. These are at the forefront of our technology, right? And I think we need to take these steps in order, in part, for the United States to continue to be leaders and innovators in this area. Really, very few places in the world engage in this type of science, directly measuring tropical cyclones. Here's just real quick spaghetti. Here's all the flights, different aircraft. You can see we cover pretty much almost every square mile in the Gulf of Mexico last year, and a number of other missions. There's Beryl moving through the Caribbean, and Ernesto that impacted Bermuda. Also, we fly in the East Pacific and the Central Pacific. We can too, so we cover it all as much as possible. So here's the emerging technology, the really critical, innovations that are coming out. So these uncrewed vehicles are bringing the next wave of hurricane observations in these really dangerous areas, like right near the air-sea interface where it's really turbulent. So here's a picture of our Black Swift S0 drone, our uncrewed system there. And you go one more here. Yep. And here's a cool video. Sorry. Now you have it in my head.
You can use the word.
This is a very nice video showing essentially how the drone gets released from the aircraft. And we're actually going to have some video on these systems next year to give us an idea of what they're actually seeing. This is just an animation, but they fly right down right near the surface. They are expendable, so we don't collect them back. Right.
Scientific rendering is what that was.
Thanks. Absolutely. Also, we work a lot with stream sondes. So these are the next generation of our drop sondes. These are really, really light, only a couple grams. And so as they fall down, they actually can get tossed around in the wind, which you say, okay, is that a good thing? Actually, it can be a good thing because they can cover very wide areas of the storm. They can even move up in certain wind environments. And so they actually stay up in the air a little bit longer and collect more data.
How big is that?
They're probably about the size of a soda can.
Wow, that, really?
That on the left, each of those. On the right, I'm glad you pointed that out. You can actually see one of them in the operator's hands there, but we can actually launch them out as packages.
Oh, that's the same thing on the left, and the one of the what she's holding on the right is the same thing.
That's right. That's right.
Wow.
Yeah,
I had
we
no
can
idea.
also swarm them, so we can release a number at once, and so they all kind of come out and spread out in their own direction. So we're doing a lot of research to figure out what's the best way to deploy them to get that data. So here you can see, sorry, I should play this. So here you can see that,
Oh, okay.
one there and doing
It's
sort
good
of
recycling.
rapid, and here they're dropping down to the ocean surface and collecting them. Okay, so I think a key part of this is the coordination that needs to occur. There's all these different assets. There's different players and collaborators who are out there. And what we do is we really work on bringing it all together. So this is an animation that shows in the background is satellite imagery for Helene, and overlaid on top are different aircraft flight tracks, and there's different markers showing expendables and buoys that are in the area. And this is over the course of several days as Helene developed in the Western Caribbean and then intensified as it moved into the Gulf of America. And I think what this really illustrates is that, again, it's this coordinated effort. Commissioner Malozzi, you brought up about, what do these different instruments bring to the table? Well, here's that, like taking a bite of the donut. So we strategically deploy all these different instruments and measure in different ways so that we can sort of capture all the different sectors of the storm and put all that data together to make the best possible forecast. Here's right before the landfall. So we'll fly all the way through landfall.
And all of the markings are all the different items that you're using.
That's right, that's right.
So everything is coming into play and helping us gather all the information to make an accurate prediction of what the storm is going to give us.
That's right, and it takes a remarkable amount of coordination, and I think like it can't be overstated, I would say, in terms of how much coordination goes into planning these missions and making them happen. From not just AOML, Hurricane Center plays a big role in that as well, and our partners over at OMAO and the Air Force. So we all come together and make sure, like, what is the best plan here so we can get the operational data first and foremost. And as researchers, we're constantly saying, okay, where can we call it tacking on research. Where can we add on research here in a way that does not interfere with the operational mission, but we can collect this extra data to help bring about these future innovations and this future forecasting.
I have no idea.
Are there, from reports from other districts and other, the news outlets as well, there have been some significant personnel cuts in NOAA. So how potentially would that affect your ability to coordinate?
Yeah, what I'll comment on that is just we're always doing our best to make sure that we can be in a position to support as many of these missions as we possibly can. So we come into the season with a game plan, we come in with a schedule, and changes to that schedule, we do our best to adapt and make it happen.
So there has been some impact on the ability if you have less personnel than you had previously. I mean,
yeah.
of course you just press. I totally get that.
Yeah,
These aren't your decisions, but
we're still assessing what those impacts are going to look like, but I think ultimately we'll see. But we're preparing for if there are impacts, how are we going to overcome those gaps, do the best that we can. Okay. So I want to chat quickly about the data impacts here. So what do we do with that data, right? We build products and tools and services and put them in front of the forecasters. We also figure out how do we best assimilate that data, include it into our model. So we collect the data as shown on the left from our aircraft and some of our other assets. That's a glider shown there in the yellow. And in the middle image here, and I'll show a little more, in the middle image is actually how all that data sort of comes together. So you can see the flight tracks are in the orange, the black dots are showing where the stropsons, the blue and the green are radar data that are collected. And so you see after we fly a mission, we don't cover every single piece of the storm, but we cover a pretty big chunk of it. And what we do is we then assimilate that data into our numerical models. And I mentioned earlier about the 20% swing. What we found here on the right, what that's showing is the performance of our HAFS hurricane model, intensity on the top and track on the bottom. And this is the difference from when you assimilate this data versus when you don't assimilate this data. And you can see that on the left axis, you have improvements that are in the range of 20 or even more percent improvements just from assimilating this additional data. So it's also there for the ocean side as well, assimilating the glider data, for example, that yellow instrument on the left. It actually can improve the ocean forecast by 30%. And so again, this data, we're constantly assessing how can we get the most bang for our buck out of numerical forecasts.
When you're saying 30%, that's good for your ships, all your maritime.
Yeah, and everything over the ocean up through landfall, and we're actually doing some studies now about looking at the data impacts after landfall as well. So data that we collect, let's say in the Gulf, we are finding that there's a memory to that in the modeling that forecasts are actually better inland as well. So we're working on that too. So it doesn't just stop at landfall, but all throughout the cycle. I think this might be my last slide. Modeling. The hurricane analysis and forecast system, or HAFS. So I mentioned this earlier, but this is the flagship model to improve hurricane predictions. It's developed in partnership between OAR and the National Weather Service. And it's upgrading to version 2.1 this year. So that will run operationally. AOML is working to develop it and transition these innovations. So what this animation is showing on the right, I sort of showed a version of this earlier, we have these magnifying glasses that allow us to zoom in and see how these storms are evolving at very high resolution, which is what you need in order to get the really tight, sharp gradients that are occurring in the eye and the eyeball. And so here you can see this is actually a computer simulation of Milton, and you zoom all the way in and get the really, really tiny inner core that was very, very strong. And so that's a remarkable step forward. And so really what we're looking at here is how do we optimize the usage of our hurricane observations from our aircraft in other places. That's really the main goal of these hurricane models, is ultimately, synthesizing all that data together to make a better list.
Well, thank you for the incredible work you do.
Yeah, and I'll just leave this one up here for a second. That's a Milton animation on the right showing rapid intensification. Mike had mentioned it, and I'll just touch on this point quickly. I mean, yeah, to see rapid intensification forecast improvements of around 50% is pretty remarkable. And I think it provides a lot of actionable evidence that the Hurricane Center and others can use to have more confidence in issuing a forecast like for Lee, where it's not even developed yet. It's forecast to become a major hurricane in a few days. So we're constantly refining these tools. And I think there's a lot more improvement that we can squeeze out of this, but we've already done quite a bit. So I'm very happy with the progress we've made so far.
Thank you. And I mean, we've had several storms over the last few years that suddenly had rapid intensification and went from being predicted to be milder hurricanes to being Cat 4 or Cat 5, very close, much closer to land than usual. So improvements in rapid intensification forecasting, like really, we need that.
Yeah, and it's complicated. The schematic on the left is, I'm not going to go into it, but there's a lot of things that can sort of inspire or squash rapid intensification, can allow it to happen or prevent it. So we're constantly looking at those ingredients.
The one that hit Tallahassee last year.
Right.
And it hit at the last minute, and it did a little jog at the last minute, but they didn't know until I want to say like the day before. It's coming, and it's coming harder, but it was because of your research, apparently, that you knew it's going to hit much harder, just because of everything that you're showing now.
But now we're trying to now we need to help you improve the ability to back up the number of days that you know that would happen. Yeah, that'll save people's lives directly. So, well, thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Alaka. Hey, Dr. Mayega, welcome back. Thank you for you and your team's work at the National Weather Service.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks for having me and the National Weather Service Miami Forecast Office be part of this important briefing. Dr. Brennan and Dr. Alaka have really already mentioned a lot of good stuff. So my job is really to localize the information as much as possible. So when there we go. This is kind of the scary looking graphic that I show in a lot of, not just this year, but also in a lot of our general presentations that we give across South Florida every year leading up to hurricane season. So these are the tracks, the centers of all the hurricanes that have passed within 60 miles of any point in Miami-Dade County and any point in Broward County. So, basically it's more or less the same information. We're just shifting the area, north or south, depending on which county we're focusing on. So the bottom line here is that no matter what the outlook is for the season, our emphasis is always be ready, because we are in a highly hurricane-prone area, and our history alone tells us this. So the number one point that we make to our community every single year is, prepare the same this year as any other season. So on its own, an active overall season does not significantly increase the likelihood of a South Florida hurricane landfall to the point where we can say, yes, we are going to get, or it's very likely we're going to get it. We don't have that skill yet to be able to predict months in advance where these storms might form and where they might go. 2020 is a pretty good example. 2020, if I'm not mistaken, 30 storms that year, the most active season on record. But South Florida did not get hit by hurricane season. So that's the bottom line. Is it only, and I know it's a cliche. It only takes one, but certainly it only takes one, and that's what really we need to be ready for any potential impacts, because again, we are in a highly hurricane-prone area. This point's already been made about the short lead times that these rapidly intensifying hurricanes lead to. And here's an example. These are the strongest hurricanes in the last 100 years at landfall in the United States. And you don't see Helene in there. You don't see Milton, because those made landfall at slightly lower intensities, but there were
and no Katrina.
other. Sorry?
And no Katrina?
Yeah. Katrina was a little bit beyond the 72-hour forecast.
Katrina was a category 3 at
Yeah,
landfall.
it was a 3 landfall. these made landfall at high-end category 4 or category 5. So the average time that these storms became a hurricane is 50 hours before landfall. So in just 2 days, that's when they became hurricanes, and then they made landfall at these levels. So this is something that, as mentioned, we've made a lot of improvements on, and it's helping us to really to get the word out even sooner. So that's really the goal here so when we put out these hurricane, excuse me, when we put out these hurricane watches and warnings, storm surge watches and warnings, that's how meteorologists best communicate our risk ahead of the storm. So these watches and warnings are they're not explicit forecasts of what each area is going to get, but it is related to what our risk of being impacted at that particular point in time. For a watch means possible impacts somewhere in that area. Warning means that it's likely or there's a danger of those hurricane or storm surge conditions somewhere in that watch or warning area. And we also need to make sure that we're paying attention to watches and warnings related to the other hazards like tornadoes and rainfall. We've also talked about rip currents and even heat, and those all have their associated watches and warnings associated with those. So we need to make sure that we're, as a community, that we're paying attention to those watches and warnings and heeding the advice of local officials in concert with these watches and warnings. And, excuse me, I don't know, my throat's gotten dry.
Do you need some water?
I think I'm good. Thank you. So central to this, especially when it comes to storm surge, and yes, storm surge, Dr. Brennan mentioned, is still a significant hazard here in Florida. And being a coastal community, we have to be very mindful of that here in Southeast Florida. So very important that people are mindful of the evacuation zones and know which zone they live in. So this is Broward zones. These are Miami-Dade's zones. So they're all different based on geography, based off the shape of the coastline, the depth of the water just offshore. So these are very localized impacts, highly dependent on the exact track and intensity of the storm. So we evaluate this very, very closely along with the other hazards associated with the storm, especially when we're in that 2, 3, 4 day period before a potential landfall. Now, something we saw last year that, Dr. Brennan alluded to it earlier, we had a significant tornado outbreak, really a historic tornado outbreak associated with Hurricane Milton on the day of Hurricane Milton's landfall on the West Coast. So while landfall was on the West Coast of the eye, here in Southeast Florida, we were impacted by these outer rain bands, 100, 200 miles away from the center. And that's the area where, in the vast majority of tropical systems, that's where these tornadoes form. So that's why we always say, don't just focus on the center of the storm. Be mindful of the fact that these storms, the impacts associated with tropical storms and hurricanes cover a pretty large area. And in the case of tornadoes, especially so. So you see there on the left that they're over the Gulf. That's the center of Hurricane Milton, the eye, as it was getting ready to make landfall on the Gulf Coast of Florida. Yet on the east coast of Florida, even from that morning of landfall, all those red boxes, those are tornado warnings that were issued from those outer bands that were over 100 miles away from the center of the storm. We had 45 known tornadoes, and who knows how many more that just didn't catch because they were out of the Everglades, you just weren't seen. 45 known tornadoes, 3 of those were EF3. EF3 are winds of at least 130, 135 miles an hour. These are considered violent tornadoes, rare for Florida. And this is the first tropical system dating back to 1995 that's produced more than one EF3 tornado. So this was a particularly rare event as far as tornadoes associated with tropical cyclones are concerned, given how unstable the atmosphere was that day, given the dynamics around the storm, which led to this historic tornado outbreak, which yes, did lead to loss of life up in St. Lucie County, and it also led to some injuries in Palm Beach County. In fact, I'm gonna show some pictures from one of those EF3 tornadoes was in Palm Beach County, in the Wellington Palm Beach Gardens area. That picture on the left is a picture of the tornado while it was still over the Everglades, right before it moved into the populated areas of Wellington and Palm Beach Gardens. So there you see that home, or what's left of that home on the right there. There were people in that home. There were some injuries. Fortunately, at least in this case, there were no fatalities. Warnings were issued ahead of time, so we think certainly those warnings and people heeding the advice of those warnings made a difference. This was maybe about 10 miles north of there in Palm Beach Gardens. This was a Publix that was getting ready to open, hadn't even opened yet. It's in a brand new neighborhood. You see the amount of damage done to the roof of that building. So the max winds we think were around 140 miles an hour. They weren't measured. They could have been more than that. We don't know for sure, but certainly an EF3 is a high-end tornado anywhere in the country, especially here in Florida.
Before you
Yes.
Go on. So that EF3 tornado, we're able to issue warnings. There are reports that the National Weather Service is no longer translating your watches and warnings and information and notifications into Spanish. Is that accurate?
That the contract ran out on that back in, I believe it was March, but it was reinstated. So we have a website that's translated. All the Weather Service forecasts and warnings are translated via the website. We also have on NOAA Weather Radio, we have broadcasts that are being translated in Spanish from the Miami transmitter. And more importantly, just as important, really, and I'm not talking about this yet, wireless emergency alerts is something that was not affected by that. And wireless emergency alerts is currently available in Spanish.
So the offerings in Spanish that were there before are there?
Yes,
again?
that's correct.
Okay, and that will continue going forward?
Yes, as far as we know.
What about Creole?
Creole, the website, the website has French translations, not Creole specifically, French. And we are working with our local partner, particularly in Miami-Dade County, to produce some Creole information graphics where we can share on social media.
That service that you were using also had other language translations like Chinese?
Yeah, Chinese.
That still continues?
Yes,
I mean, obviously not as many people, but okay, I just wanted, so there was a small interruption, but.
Correct, yes, yeah, it's back in service.
Why weren't you able to measure that wind with everything that we have on the ground, in the air, and everywhere else that measures everything?
Yeah, we would need to have instruments actually located in the area where the highest wind occurred. And, tornadoes are so small relatively, we're talking a hurricane is a system that's, in some cases, a couple hundred miles wide. And of course, we can forecast those, farther in advance. Tornadoes develop very quickly and are much smaller. So trying to get in there right when a tornado is forming and having a song or having some type of instrument that can measure that wind at that time it's very rare. It's hard to do. So what we do is we estimate. These are estimated. I should have put estimated, not just max wind. We do surveys that we look at the level of damage, the intensity of damage. For example, like these pictures here, like that one there. So we have a toolkit that, based on the level of damage to specific objects, or trees or buildings, structures, etc., we can give a reasonable estimate of the wind speed that would have led to that type of damage. That's how we rate tornadoes. So it underscores the importance of looking outside the cone when it comes to assessing and knowing, what level of impact an area can face. So we just don't look at the cone. We're also assessing the size of the storm. We're assessing the direction of motion. We're also looking at the track of the storm, varying even by a little bit can make a big difference in as far as what areas or which area could get the worst conditions. So we focus on products such as, again, watches and warnings, as I mentioned before, that take into account not just the cone, but also the size of the storm and any potential variations in that forecast track or intensity, the time of arrival, which can be earlier or later, depending on changes in the storm, the probabilities of wind speeds reaching tropical storm or hurricane force, storm surge, which again is very highly dependent on the exact track of the storm. And then we also have these hurricane threat and impact graphics that show the potential level of impact based on a reasonable worst case scenario. So we're not just taking we're not just taking the official forecast and thinking, okay, this is the only potential scenario. That is the more likely scenario, but we also have to keep in mind there could be slight shifts in the track of the storm, slight shifts in the intensity of the storm that can make a difference as far as where exactly these impacts could line up. So these are graphics that the National Weather Service, local forecast offices all across the country, here in South Florida, we put together. We do with every single forecast, every 6 hours, and we put these on our website, on social media.
And those are really helpful graphics. And that's when you send those out to the elected officials, being able to see those in color and it's straightforward and clear. People are able to make decisions off of your graphics.
Right, and I really appreciate that, because that's something that we've really worked hard, not just within the National Weather Service, but we've also worked very hard with social scientists over the last couple of decades in order to, for example, the colors that help with the interpretation of that information, the wording. So it's really, I consider it it's a continual process of learning
and colors.
Just,
I appreciate them. I know that that's the best part of being elected is I always get the updates every morning. I'm like, okay, good. So
yeah. So at the end of the day, these graphics are really meant to convey what to prepare for, given a safety margin. So again, this does tie in at least somewhat with the watches and warnings. So again, just to emphasize the point that I made earlier, we want to make sure that people are, when we're paying attention to these and taking action, because this is our risk communication tool. And again, we want to make sure that people also pay attention to tornado and flood watches and warnings as well. With the multitude of information out there, we always want to make sure that we emphasize that people follow official trusted sources of information. From the National Weather Service, through our websites, weather.gov, hurricanes.gov, on our social media platforms as well, our local media certainly, and also our local officials. So we're very well represented by all of these trusted sources here at this table and at this meeting. And having multiple ways of receiving weather alerts, and this is something that we've preached in the past, and certainly in light of the tornadoes last year, we want to make sure that people are not just relying on one way of getting alerts. In other words, it could be having a few apps or having a couple of apps that they're using in order. Yes, it is redundant, but we want to make sure that people are getting that message, especially when it comes to a tornado warning, where you literally might have only 15 minutes to prepare for a direct impact of a tornado, or whether it's a hurricane or an evacuation order issued by a county. We want to make sure that people are relying on those, multiple ways of receiving weather alerts, whether through apps, TV and radio, or cities and counties provide those services as well. And the last point I'll make here is wireless emergency alerts, and this is one easy way that people can get alerts. There's no subscription. Pretty much every phone nowadays is already equipped with this functionality, with the ability to receive wireless emergency alerts. It's a joint effort between government and wireless industry that pushes these alerts to all mobile devices that are in that warning area. So it's not going to blanket necessarily an entire region just for a small part of that region being threatened. It's really going to be more targeted to those areas that are under that direct threat. For example, for hurricane warnings, extreme wind warnings for a Category 3 or higher winds inside of the core of the storm, storm surge warnings, And they're also activated for tornado warnings and flash flood warnings. So that's pretty much what I have.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Yeah, just a question. The reductions in force, terminations, retirements, attrition, how have those impacted the National Weather Service, particularly the Florida offices, and what will that do to your ability to do everything we need to make sure we can take care of people during the hurricane season?
Fortunately, our office in Miami was not really directly impacted, especially in the operational unit by those actions. We are working closely with our neighboring forecast offices across the state, down at the Keys, as well as also up in Central Florida and the Tampa and Melbourne offices. So we're working together in order to make sure that we can rely on each other for resources and staff in the event that we have a large scale event. So we do have not only statewide support, we also have regional support when it comes to making sure that we have the resources and the staff to be available to be able to handle and to surge properly for a significant weather event like a hurricane or any type.
So you are having to make those contingency plans as a result of reductions in force and fewer employees?
We do have plans in place that take into account lower levels of staffing compared to the last couple of years. So, and again, that's working with our neighboring offices. Those plans are very, very much in place, and also working with our national and regional offices to make sure that that we have a pool of people that are available to help out, to go and help an office. And this has always been the case, regardless of levels of staffing, but certainly nowadays it's even more important that we tap into those resources.
I know it always happens, but if it might be a little more challenging if there are fewer personnel at some certain offices around the country, and you're having to, sort of step in the gap for one another. That's somewhat concerning, given that you're dealing with naturally caused events.
Right.
So there's no way to plan for those in terms of personnel that you'll need. So is there cause for concern that if a natural disaster happens in another area where there were terminations and reductions in force, and we're dealing with a hurricane or tornadoes or whatever we usually deal with in hurricane season, is our ability to make sure we have the personnel needed that would normally surge here, or to help others impacted by those events?
Yeah, I mean, those are decisions as far as where to surge. Staffing obviously is going to be related to what's going to be. It's going to depend on the areas that are being impacted. I know that our regional center is staffed. We have a regional operations center that, much like an emergency operations center, gets staffed up when there's at least a threat. We're talking even days in advance, a threat of a high impact weather event affecting really any part of the U.S. And that's when the planning begins. So the planning really can begin well in advance, even if the threat appears to be fairly low. We're already making contingency plans. We're already starting to say, okay, if the situation continues to materialize, maybe we're still 5, 6, 7 days away. Okay, these are the areas where we are going to focus on and make sure that the resources are available. So these are, and this is something that we've done for quite a number of years now, but this year, certainly we're gonna have to make sure that we really that we're ahead of the game as much.
Fewer personnel, it makes it more challenging.
It certainly has its challenges, certainly does, but we are going to be as committed, or if not more committed than ever.
I don't doubt
to make sure,
your team's commitment.
To make sure that we allocate smartly and as far in advance as possible to provide a level of service that we all need.
Well, as an appropriator, I plan to make sure that you don't have those reductions, so that it's not as hard. Because life stay in balance when we reduce life safety personnel, and we're on the path of natural disasters anywhere in the country. So thank you very much. And I know you'll have to
Yeah.
depart soon, so
Thank you very much.
really appreciate your service and your whole team. So please send your regards.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to John Brogan from FEMA, who is attending virtually.
Hey, good morning. This is Brandon Belinsky. We're going to start here from the region and pass it back over to John. Thank you, first of all, Representative Wasserman Schultz, for this opportunity to talk to you about FEMA's preparations for 2025 hurricane season. You know, before, during, after, we are always working, especially with our state partners, Director Guthrie and his team at FDEM, and all the partners, including American Red Cross and a lot of our other partners in the state. Fortunately, we've done this many years and for many, many events, so we've gotten really good at it. We also work in partnership with NOAA National Weather Service. They're in the room at the Hurricane Center and the weather with the Weather Service. We help enforce their mission, reinforce some of their mission and monitoring the storm and developments and make sure there's a timely response. In particular, the Hurricane Liaison Team that is staffed at the Hurricane Center, the FEMA Hurricane Liaison Team, will deploy regional personnel to work with the Florida Division of Emergency Management staff and other partners to make sure that we can monitor developments and also ensure timely response efforts, including evacuations to support that effort. In the end, we're ready. We're always, that is our job, to be ready before, during, and after. One of our big things we do to be ready, though, is maintaining commodities and supplies, tarps, food, water at our distribution centers that are around the U.S., strategically placed to support Florida, and all of them can support Florida. We also pre-position supplies, so before a storm comes in and we have a feel where the threat may be, we'll load up our staging areas. For instance, for Florida, we use Incident Support Base Maxwell Air Force Base, Montgomery, Alabama, but we can set up more support bases based on the state's needs, based on their state staging areas. So we'll be working with the state in conjunction with them as in lockstep as the forecast might be changing to make sure that we have the resources and the personnel ready at hand when it's coming at us. So with that, I'd like to turn over to our Federal Coordinating Officer, John Brogan, to discuss more about individual preparedness and some of our recovery efforts in Florida.
Right, good morning, everybody. Thank you, Brandon. As he said, I'm John Brogan. I'm the FCO here in Florida. I was appointed last year over all the Florida disasters, and depending on your perspective, I was the FCO for Debbie, Helene, and Milton last year. So I was the FCO for those response and recovery efforts. I'm still stationed here in Florida. I don't know if I'll be the FCO for new events, but as of right now, I'm still in Florida. So take that as you will. We continue to work with our state and local partners. As Brandon said, we work closely with the state, but not just the state, but with locals as well on our recovery effort. To date, for those storms, we've delivered over $1.7 billion for Floridians and $2.1 billion in assistance to local governments. So that 1.7 for individual assistance and $2 billion in public assistance. And those numbers go up every day. So we're going to still move forward with those recovery efforts, not just for Helene and Milton, but for Debbie, Adelia. There's a lot. There's a lot. Unfortunately, as we have said, Florida's had some practice over the last 3 years. So we're gonna still move forward on those recovery efforts while focusing on any new events. No matter where you live in Florida, as you saw from those charts earlier, right? The West Coast has kind of gotten the brunt over the last 3 years, but the East Coast is certainly prone to hurricanes as well. So no matter where you live, we'd ask that you be ready, and we appreciate. Representative Wasserman Schultz, appreciate the opportunity to talk on this forum to the public today. Before a hurricane happens, it's important that you are ready. And there's a lot of steps people can take right now to be ready for a hurricane. Important documents, make sure those are up to date. Check on your neighbors, check on your friends, check on your family. Do they have an evacuation plan? Are they getting prepared? Do they need help being prepared? Do they need help with an evacuation? Have that plan. Like I said, know where you're going to go if you're told to evacuate, if you're in one of those zones that we showed earlier. You may not have to go far, right? One of the things we've talked about is previously, a lot of folks would drive, hundreds of miles inland to get away from the hurricane. You may not have to go that far, right? It might just be getting out of some of those coastal zones to get away from that storm surge. There's also shelters you can go to as well. But I would ask again, check with friends and family. Just because you have a plan, make sure they have a way to get out of there. A lot of the demographics in Florida, we have a lot of elderly population in Florida. They may not have the means. So please do yourself a favor and check with your neighbors. One of the things we talk about in it's kind of become a new saying is half is the new empty. And by that, I mean your gas tank, right? So when you get, as we get in hurricane season, as you get to about half full in your gas tank, do yourself a favor and top it off so you're full. That can help alleviate a lot of things when it comes to not just your evacuation, but when it comes to what we've seen in the past where people have runs on gas stations. So if you're constantly topping off that tank ahead of an event, you're better positioned once the event happens. I'd also encourage folks to go to ready.gov/start. It's a great site. And we can certainly provide that to your office, ma'am, to pass out to your constituents. Got a lot of checklist templates. It basically helps walk individuals through helping get ready for a disaster, not just for a hurricane, for any disaster. And again, I would encourage everyone, hurricane season, 3 more days, but you have time. So if you haven't started yet, you still have time to prepare and start to do that now. Don't wait. And again, I cannot stress enough to check on your extended friends and families and loved ones and neighbors, because really when it comes down to that immediate response, it's at that local level, and neighbors helping neighbors is how we help save lives and mitigate any future loss of life. I will again, I'll reiterate what Brendan said. We work closely with our FDM partners every day. We're going through the same things we did last year, having conversations with them about what things are going to look like going into next hurricane season. A lot of the folks that are here at the Joint Field Office for the response. And so we'll work as close as we can with FDM and be ready. And I would just say, again, now's the time to prepare. And thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, John and Brandon. And I'm not sure to whom I should direct these questions, but FEMA rescinded its official strategic plan for the hurricane season last week and has not yet released a new one. As you mentioned, hurricane season starts on June 1st, which is 3 days away. Will FEMA have a revised strategic plan released to the public before then? I don't know which one of you can answer that.
It's true about the plan. In the end, though, a lot of our readiness activities, we've been meeting with the state. They were here in offices. We've been down in their offices being ready, and a lot of our training and our tactical plans for how we respond to disasters remain. And all those programs are still
Oh, no, I understand
forward.
that, but strategy drives tactics. And so obviously we have strategic plans each hurricane season for a reason, and Congress directs to release one. So is there a plan to release the strategic plan for this hurricane season for the public before hurricane season begins? And if not, when hurricane season begins, when will we have it?
Congresswoman, that's something I would think that should be directed to our congressional desk at the headquarters to answer versus at the field level.
Okay, well, I mean, you're at a hurricane season briefing. I would think that would be a question that you might be able to answer without referring me to the congressional legislative liaisons. So do you not know, or?
It was
Go ahead, Brendan.
Yeah, I think this week. I think we're going to have it as we go into hurricane season.
Okay, and I know it's a very sensitive and difficult time, and I don't want to put you in an uncomfortable position, but these are sort of, I'm just going to ask you very basic questions that you should hopefully be able to answer. I'm not trying to play gotcha. We require a strategic plan. We don't have it. If it's not going to be here by June 1st, you're saying then this week, within the week, there will be a strategic plan released, you think, to the public? Brian?
Yes, and it'll be shared with your office.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Will it be shared with the public?
Yes.
Okay. There's also been reports, and I know that reports are just that, reports, but there are documents that have been reported on that describe discussions that FEMA is having, or that Department of Homeland Security is having, to quadruple the threshold in which there would be a presidential disaster declared by FEMA, and what would trigger FEMA's involvement and the reimbursement process and what level of reimbursement that is. If that is quadrupled, just to give you an idea, and folks who are watching an idea, if that higher threshold is actually implemented, 71% of all national events from 2008 to 2024 would not have qualified for disaster assistance. And I'm pretty sure that means nearly all of the hurricanes that have made landfall in Florida. So is there a plan to quadruple the threshold under which a presidential disaster declaration would be declared?
Yeah, I can't speak to that, but I know that presidential disaster declarations are being approved.
Right. You can't speak to that because you don't know?
Yeah, I'm not involved in those conversations, thankfully.
Okay.
Higher levels, thank you.
Okay. Would the strategic plan include that information when it's released?
I'm not aware, sorry.
Okay, that's all right. What about, now this is something that you should be more familiar with, in terms of the reimbursement, the percentage of reimbursement. There are discussions being had, from what I understand, to pare back the reimbursement rate to 75%, which is the minimum in federal law. We've seen in Florida, last year's hurricanes, I believe, were approved at 100% reimbursement. And so, do you know can you share with us, and I have Commissioner Malozzi here from the city of Cooper City, who I'm sure would be concerned about that because they've been hit pretty hard when we've had landfall, and they're a small city, so that having that much less of reimbursement in the aftermath of a storm would affect a city like Cooper City pretty dramatically. So can you share with us what cities and what individual assistance, between IA, individual assistance, and the reimbursement for debris removal and cleanup, what can be expected this hurricane season?
Yes, ma'am. So as of right now, the Stafford Act remains, so that the way we are going to implement our programs, there's no change to that. Generally speaking, when we're talking about the cost share adjustment, those are things that the state would request. For the last events, we did have a cost share adjustment, but that was for a specific window of time, right? So that wasn't 100% for the entire duration of the recovery. I believe it was a 90-day window that they had the 100% at. And then it went back to the 75% after that window. So we would, as of right now, we're gonna approach it the same way. In lieu of additional guidance, that is the plan. We're gonna approach it the same way, and the states can still make that request for cost share adjustments as they see fit. No changes to how we're gonna implement individual assistance program. That's still gonna be the same way we would do it that we did it for Helene and Milton last year.
There would still be an opportunity, like there has been in the past, to have up to 100% of coverage, depending on the situation.
As far as I know, the states could still request an adjustment to that cost share based on the conditions.
But would the policy be that would be approved?
I don't know that, ma'am.
Okay, what about the individual assistance that goes to impacted homeowners and businesses?
Yeah, there's no change for that. The cost share adjustment. Sorry. That normally applies to public assistance, not individual assistance. So there should not be any changes to how we deliver individual assistance and how that would impact any survivors.
Can I interject?
Yeah, please.
I let her go first because this is her rodeo, but I'm gonna be nice. So,
Want them to come back, yes.
no, I do. I'm being nice. See, look, I'm smiling. So in reference to municipalities, I'm going to hope because I am a very small city, that you're going to go and we're going to be able to go with for the first 90 days, 100%. And then afterwards, hopefully, we'll be able to get at least the minimum of the 75%. But I'm going to let you know that I have several friends that have properties that were in Treasure Island, and they were denied initially, and they were denied after they had to initially make their FEMA claim. They were denied. Several were denied after they were initially denied, and they never got any reimbursement whatsoever. And some got some after they were denied the first time. I also have several friends that were in the Carolinas that never got any help from FEMA whatsoever. So while I appreciate you saying all that you do, and I know that you have done a lot, from someone that has many friends that have been hit by massive storms, I know there are a lot of people that have still received absolutely nothing. So knowing that, I've heard many predictions of who knows where they're gonna hit. We know they're gonna hit, we just don't know where. It scares the heck out of me. And I don't wanna hear any more stories from people that I know throughout the United States that they haven't received anything and they're hurting. And there are still people that are in the Carolinas now that have not received any assistance whatsoever and are still waiting to become whole, and that are still waiting to have their homes repaired, et cetera. So we're gonna potentially get hit with, what did we say, Dr. Brennan? 13 storms are coming?
Season. Yeah.
Right. So how do you reply to that, gentlemen? Said with love.
Ma'am, so the first thing I would say is, I feel awful if there were mistakes made and we want to get it right. Without knowing individual cases, I can't really speak to like why individual. I can't speak to that. So it's hard to speak to why those individuals that may have received a letter. I will just tell you that we strive to get it right. We are still working. We still answer. We have lots of requests that come through congressional offices. I see cases I see situations that are fixed every day. So if we got it wrong, we want to get it right, and we want to make sure that we articulate if FEMA is not the right avenue, because again, there may be some things that FEMA may not be able to help survivors with. Then we need to make sure that those individuals are linked up with those resources that can help them on that path. And there's a variety of local, state, there's voluntary agencies. It may not be FEMA. There's a variety of resources out there for survivors. FEMA is just one part of that recovery process. And that is not to abdicate mistakes that were made. But I will just, again, if we made a mistake, we want to get it right. And so I take that very seriously. So if they have appealed, if they haven't appealed, I would ask that they do appeal. Wasserman Schultz, I know that, we take a lot of inquiries from congressional offices all the time on individual cases. So that is another method for that to work. And we have staff at the JFO that are working these cases every single day.
You can always call and we can interface with FEMA.
I don't know if they were part of your district or not. I mean, I know Treasure Coast and the Carolinas, so.
Not necessarily folks in the city, yeah, okay. Look, I know you're not decision makers, you're implementers, and I understand that, but, this is a hurricane preparedness briefing, so I'm trying to, help people in my district get a sense of how ready we all are, and all these agencies are. I mean, you're facing a $646 million budget cut. 2,000 FEMA employees have been terminated or are retired. Not your decision, but I am concerned and would ask you how that reduction in force is going to impact our ability to make sure that the folks live a very well prepared state, no matter what year it is. We know how to do hurricanes here in Florida, but we have always done that and have needed to do it with the robust support from FEMA. So with the current state of FEMA and the aftermath of those budget cuts, and hopefully as an appropriator, I will be able to help restore a lot of that. But how have the cuts impacted both the personnel and funding cuts impacted FEMA's ability to be ready for the hurricane season and to react to it in the aftermath.
Yeah,
So ma'am, the
so,
short, go ahead, Brandon, you had it.
Thanks. And it's hitting back on some of the key points, the amount of readiness work we've done in the off season and training, along with work with FDEM. As you know, we work on that model of locally executed, state managed, federally supported. So we're always thinking about that support factor and having those support personnel ready, having those folks trained up, additional people trained up. In the state of Florida, they probably have the second most amount of FEMA staff in it between the field offices. So we have a lot of staff already in the field to support a lot of those efforts for immediate life-sustaining, life-saving missions. So it's just been a look at our rosters and we're something we always do every year, but making sure they're full up, people are trained and ready to go, and the usual readiness trainings and meetings that we do that are ongoing.
And my understanding is that you are bringing in temporary personnel to address some of those missing personnel because of the full-time staff that were let go.
Yeah, we have a ability to pull from the federal workforce, the surge capacity force to support some of those missions that might be field supported or heavy on personnel.
You're not specifically hiring additional personnel outside of those surge capabilities?
No. Sure.
No? Okay. So that's
If I could just add too, we have from still doing the recovery effort, we have over 1,000 staff in Florida alone between the Joint Field Office and Recovery Office, which is fairly similar to where we were at last year going into hurricane season. So we're taking.
Those are people who are here because of storms that have already hit us.
They are, but what we did last year, we're doing the same thing this year. Everyone can be turned into a responder if we need it, right? So the idea is it's not just those 1,000 people are gonna be sitting on the sidelines if a new storm hits. We're gonna leverage all those FEMA staff to respond to a new event if we need to. And then again, if we need to bring in additional staff, we will. But we're having those conversations with FDEM. We're having those conversations about how we're going to be able to support the state and be able to have that planning ahead of time. So we're not having those discussions 2 days ahead of landfall. So we're trying to take the same approach as last year. And again, I think last year, based on our relationship with FDEM, it was strained because we had a lot of other states had events. But we're taking the same approach this year with the staff we already have in the state. Many of them who went through last year as well. I think we're positioned fairly well in Florida to be ready for the hurricane season.
I hear you, but we have your personnel in our state because we've gotten hit by multiple storms. If this is a storm season like 2020 was, as we were just briefed, where there was a very large prediction of storms, but none made landfall in Florida, then those folks in a season like that wouldn't be here. You'll have some of those folks leave when they're done with their assignment. So as FEMA is reimagining itself, which is a term that's being used, it's absolutely essential that we make sure that the footprint of FEMA has the capability of, and so I've asked you to take this message back because I know you're not the decision makers, you're the implementers. And we appreciate the work you do. The regional FEMA team, the on-the-ground FEMA folks are amazing. They've taken care of our people for many years and do a fantastic job. But we can't reimagine FEMA with this tiny pinpoint of a footprint and leave all of the aftermath, follow-up, and cleanup, including paying for it, to cities like Cooper City. How many people are?
Just under 36,000.
Just under 36,000, and what is Cooper City's budget? Total? Yeah. A small city like Cooper City cannot be expected to bear the burden of cleaning up. That's a city that has a tremendous amount of trees. They are a tree city, USA city. I have cities all over my district that, one of the biggest problems is when trees fall. That debris cleanup is cost prohibitive for cities like Cooper City if they end up with the burden of having to handle that, particularly if the formula that exists for a presidential declaration, disaster declaration, quadruples. So
I'm trying to budget for a bucket truck.
yeah, none of that is directed at you directly, but just if you can, I know there's some folks that are probably hearing what I'm saying that are with you, so you could make sure that they take that message back. Thank you.
Loud and clear, ma'am.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the work that you and your incredible teams do every single day, and thank you for joining us. I really appreciate it. Trying to limit my questions to hurricane preparedness for this season, and so I did my best to make sure that that we kept it in that window. Thank you all. Thank you for joining us. I appreciate it. Okay,
Thank
we'll
you.
move on. Thank you. Thank you for your service. We'll move on to Clay Pacheco from the Broward County Emergency Management.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. First and foremost, thanks to all our partners here at the table. Thank you. Congressman Wasserman Schultz, we appreciate your time today to give you this quick brief. As you all see with the seasonal outlook, we've really been focusing on what I like to call the hurricane emergency. We've seen these figures of what we're looking at this year, but my biggest fear is that rapid intensification, last minute storm off the coast, having to move the amount of people that we need to move in Broward County. So with that, we do quite a bit of preparedness throughout the whole region. We work with our partners in Miami-Dade quite often. We do quite a bit of training, over 50 classes here that we offer to everyone in the region, including all our whole community stakeholders. We update our plans, and we do a bunch of exercises to prepare not just for hurricanes and disasters, but all hazards, all types of incidents from terrorism to crowd management with the upcoming FIFA initiative. But what we're really depending on, and the message I preach to our constituents, our friends, neighbors, and families, I do it on the radio, I do it with the news media partners, is personal preparedness. Really taking the time to prepare your family, have a plan, utilize checklists, because that whole community preparedness is going to make a difference in our resilience. First and foremost with businesses. As a matter of fact, today, we're doing a municipal business seminar at our shop in the EOC. We have businesses from all the municipalities coming. They're going to spend about 2 hours with us talking about how to prepare their plan, how to prepare their employees to get their mission critical functions up and running and get their revenues back in, get their businesses opened up again. So we're going to do that at our shop today at 2 o'clock. We're expecting over 150 people. One of the things that we're going to preach to them today is actually taking the time to put a plan together and looking at how to get their businesses up and running, but also the personal preparedness for their families and friends. One thing I also speak a lot about, especially on the radio, directly to the people, is really looking at our evacuation map and understanding your evacuation zone. In Broward, as Rob so eloquently mentioned, due to our geography, we're actually pretty lucky that we have 2 evacuation zones. We have one, which is the barrier islands. You see there, evacuation zone A, which is the beaches. Pretty much if you have to drive over the intercoastal, you're in evacuation zone A. Then evacuation zone B is US 1 going east. So pretty straightforward. As many of us who were down here for the 04-05 hurricane season, I had my family drive, 6 hours to Jacksonville, stuck in traffic for 12 hours. That's not the case. You can go to a shelter, you can go stay with friends or family, a few miles out of the evacuation zone. As we always preach to everyone, run from the water, hide from the wind. You don't have to leave the county, you just have to leave your evacuation zone. It's something we preach over and over to all our friends and family. We actually have 35 shelters. I have 33 listed there because 2 of them are actually having construction. We hope to have them up and running in a couple of weeks, so we'll be back up to 35. We also have 5 special needs shelters. We do quite a bit of outreach in multiple locations. We have about 40 outreach events throughout the year, really stressing to the public the importance of special needs shelters and what that offers to folks with special medical needs, how they can register at www.broward.org/at-risk. They can do the application online. If they need to call in to our office to fill the application out manually, they can reach us at the 954 number you see there, 831-3902, and we will do the special needs application for them. Yes, ma'am.
Two questions. In reference to your business that you have, so I was wondering if there anything that you might be able to bring to my city, or something that I could bring to my businesses, because you said you have 150 people coming, and while that's a great number, I know I have 150 businesses that I would love to get it to myself, and that is not indicative of the amount of businesses that are in Broward County. So I know that there are many more that should be getting that message.
Yes.
So I would love to have you or have that information, number one. And number two, when you're talking about special needs, my city, I'm gonna brag here, is an autistic awareness. We're autism friendly. So woohoo for Cooper City. But I don't know, do you have any of your shelters, are they autism friendly?
Yes, special needs shelters are. And that's something what I would suggest to your constituents is to fill out the application for being let into the shelter. We have, behavioral health folks there. We have, it's run by the Department of Health, and they're nurses. We have medics there. We have people that attend to all types of special needs, everything from oxygen dependent to electrically dependent to autism. So I would highly suggest getting an application in and making sure you're assigned to a shelter. That way, once we make that call for the evacuation, I will be on TV announcing which shelters are actually open throughout the county. We have a total of 5. We phase them in as needed. And but that's something that I would highly suggest. And as far as the businesses, you have my card there. Please reach out to me. I would love to meet with business owners and preach on about business resiliency. That would be my pleasure. I love doing that. As a former business owner, I know how important it is dealing with hurricanes. The next slide here, pet-friendly shelters is another thing. As many of us who have pets know, we're not going anywhere without our pet. So that's very important. We have 3 currently. We actually are finalizing ordering supplies to open 4. Also will be announced via, multiple media sources, our social media. I'll be on TV talking about it, letting people know, they bring their food, bring their carrier and crate. We do anticipate many folks that don't have crates will show up. So we do have a stock in our warehouse that we do send to friendly shelters. We also send food and other supplies that may be needed for those folks that may not be able to bring their own supplies or just don't have them. So that's a very big and important part of our sheltering system, is being able to accept dogs, cats, even ponies, domestic birds. We accept them all in the emergency. On the preparedness side, one thing we also preach is really looking at friends, family, and neighbors to be prepared to at least self-sustain for about 3 days is what we're looking for. They haven't announced it officially yet, unless it came out this morning. I haven't seen it, but usually they do the sales tax holiday from June 1 through June 14th for the hurricane season, and then they have a second holiday through August 24th through September 6th. I will reach out to you once I see that's official, that we can put it all over our social media. You can pass it on.
I mean, the legislature is still in session, and they haven't passed the budget yet. June 1st is this weekend, so I would imagine first tax holiday is likely not gonna happen.
Not gonna happen, or maybe start a week or 2 later.
Yeah, depending on when they get done and what they include.
So we do have a list, floridarevenue.com/disaster prep with everything that qualifies for that tax holiday once it's initiated. But definitely, I mean, the big message I have is now's the time to prepare. We have Alert Broward, for those that are not aware, www.broward.org/emergency, where you can sign up for those alerts that we send out for all types of hazards and evacuations, flash flooding. We're also on Facebook, the Broward County Emergency Management. We're on X at Ready Broward. And also we have our 311 call center, which day to day is open 8:30 to 5. But once we have an activation, even a level 2 activation of our EOC, we go 24-hour periods with the 311 center where people can get guidance, information on sheltering. They're also going to help us take that surge of folks that may need to fill out a special medical needs application, so they can call 311 and address all those issues. In closing remarks, like I say, the thing that worries me the most is the rapid intensification. You mentioned budgets, municipalities, that's another concern I have. Actually, speaking of Treasure Island, I sent two of my best staff members to Treasure Island twice to help out for 2 weeks at a time in their EOC and help them get things together. But one thing that came out of that really opened my eyes was exactly what you mentioned about, as a small municipality, you only have a certain amount of reserves. And some of the damage we saw in Treasure Island, like in many cities in that coast, they said Uncle Day 2, they were out of money, especially with the debris cleanup as you mentioned. And it's something that really concerns me, that we have very affluent municipalities, but we have other small municipalities that would really struggle, even by day 2 or day 3, as far as being able to cover costs. So that's something I also preach with municipalities. We get together every month at the Florida Fire Chiefs Subcommittee meeting. We also have our Emergency Coordinating Council, which is a subcommittee of the mission. Broward County, we meet quarterly, and there, I've been able to work with Jason Chalkley and Tim Fleming and Tina. They attend those meetings with us where we do some coordination, but I understand there's some municipalities where the way they're staffed, they cannot attend a lot of these meetings. So for example, with the city of Weston, I met with Don Decker and Carl Thompson, went, sat with them for a few hours, went over their capabilities, what we could help them with, what kind of training can we provide, what kind of exercises can we provide specifically for the city. So biggest part of my job is really making sure that municipalities have the capabilities and all the resources they need to be successful.
Another problem that we're gonna find with municipalities, like I know our municipalities, we contract debris cleanup out. So we're gonna contract out with, I don't remember the name of the company, but Company X. And Company X also will contract out with several other municipalities. And that same company is doing so many. Their resources are also going to be limited. So we're all going to be hit or miss. Then the other problem is our employees have to be able to get to work in order to help us with cleanup. And our employees are scattered all throughout the county. So can they get to work? Maybe, maybe not, depending on how bad the storm is and how far they live and the vehicles they have and how bad their home is. So, there are so many, different variables, and that's a hit or miss for everyone. So,
Across the board, it's another big concern of mine because like you said, there's, let's say, 5 or 6 big debris companies that pretty much have a monopoly on the system. And what's happened, I've been at this over 20 years, and many times I've seen where they've even not come to our town when I was in Central Florida because Naples was willing to pay, much more.
Right.
And so that's an issue that.
They
we're looking
abandoned
at.
a commitment that they had
Yes.
with the municipality here because Miami-Dade was paying them more.
Right.
And so, they were making the city that they had a pre-planned contract with wait because they were getting a higher
So
rate.
it happened with Elaine and it happened with Milton. We start again, even after all these years of lessons learned. And that's what, where I give a lot of credit to the Florida Division of Emergency Management, because I believe might have been 18 or 20 cities said uncle, and Florida Division of Emergency Management stepped in with their logistics and debris contracts. And basically, it wasn't even a piggyback. It was a direct mission assigned to the state where they stepped in and got it done because certain contractors weren't showing up.
And
And
there's
that's
so
something
much
you have
we
to
can
plan
do.
for. There's only so much you can do.
Right, we can plan, we can say, okay, we're going to do this, but there's only so much. I can't force you as as the contractor saying you must be here.
Right.
Right,
and that's the key point. Like you're a municipal rep that'll be an REOC, making me aware of the situation where I can anticipate that and sort of forecast, speak to the state about those type of needs that multiple municipalities are going to have, and they can plan for it ahead of time.
Right. The other issue is that because it seems a little uncertain, if FEMA ends up coming in with far less funding or none, if they change the formula by which they make a decision about whether a declaration is declared at all, then cities are going to be not only in a situation where they have trouble getting a contractor to do cleanup, but then how are they going to pay for it? Right. If they're not reimbursed
And it
by
goes
FEMA.
back to the reserves. I mean, even at the county level, we have a certain amount of reserves, but that formula throw that upside down.
Right. That's why. Make sure that we're pushing.
and then there's also, and I was being nice, but there's also not necessarily FEMA does not always have the same standard, because I have people that were in Treasure Island that were in the Carolinas that they had the same exact insurance, and one got it and one did not. One was denied, one was not. One was denied, and then the second time they applied, got it and did not. So with the same circumstance, and they were next door neighbors.
Yeah,
So-
it can be, the reimbursement process can be challenging. It would be made especially more challenging if they change whether you even have a disaster declared.
Right.
Right, if
That's
you just qualify for
a whole
reimbursement.
nother ball of wax.
And then FEMA's not involved at all because there's been no presidential declaration. So that's something that people need to be mindful of. Just really quick, I know, because I've seen Dr. Spiro's presentation before, Miami-Dade has an app. Do we have that for hurricane preparedness, and are we in the process of developing one?
We are working on that. We're actually at the development stage. We have, the website has some stuff. We do have a damage assessment app where the public can actually put their own damage in and help us capture that. Municipalities, your team, Cooper City uses something called RIO, which is a rapid impact assessment app, which actually lets us know not just wind damage, but flood. It really helped us during the June floods of last year. We get information real time and actually map and send pumps and resources where needed.
Are you sending out the booklet that you usually send out so, it's the 21st century. People need both paper and technology. So, of course, if all our phones go dead in a hurricane, it's good to have the paper. So we need to, that'll be on FPL. We'll get to that.
No pressure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.
Please reach out to the business.
Oh, don't worry, I will.
All right, well, good afternoon as well. I appreciate the opportunity to speak on behalf of our director, Pete Gomez, Miami-Dade County, what we're doing for our residents as well. So I'll keep this brief. So we're nearly, 2.8 million population between Palm Beach County, Broward, Miami-Dade, and Keys. We're near 10 million people. So we're a big portion of the state's population down here. We have 34 jurisdictions incorporated, so we have a lot of partners out there that we engage with. We have 5 storm surge planning zones. You find that over 50% of our residents fall within those 5 zones as well. So we do a lot of planning. In addition to that, we have 8,200, 8,500 critical identified facilities throughout the entire county as well. It's everything from substations to hospitals to assisted living facilities, police stations, fire stations, etc. It's an extensive list. We work with FP&L to prioritize that list each and every year as well. We utilize a lot of technology and mapping from ArcGIS to assist us, in particular when it comes to storm surge, but also with flooding. Blue sky flooding, rainy day flooding is a common thing that we see here in Southeast Florida as well, but we work a lot with our GIS partners within the county and our regions for South Florida Water Management District and the Army Corps of Engineers to help support our information sharing and intelligence for the public. Like Clay, we have our evacuation centers as well. We have over 80 identified in Miami-Dade County. We don't publicize these throughout the community because in the past, if they see a list, something's happening, they just automatically report to those shelters and that creates problems with us. So we post that information out in advance when we're going to know when those are going to be activated and already staffed and provisioned up appropriately as well. In addition to the general population shelter, we do have pet-friendly shelters, so you can bring your Fido and your kitty cat over there. We do have medical evacuation centers as well for those that are medically dependent. We do have an evacuation assistance employee evacuation program for those that are reliant on oxygen or our special healthcare needs as well. So we communicate with them twice a year to ensure that their information is updated in the system. And before the landfall of any tropical systems, we do reach out to all those individuals in advance as well. Talk briefly here about our partnerships. 34 jurisdictions throughout Miami-Dade County. We work with them very closely. We have a municipal planner. His job is solely to work with the cities, help them with their comprehensive emergency management plans, their mitigation strategies, help to improve their operational capabilities and readiness as well. We do have our number of other partner agencies, federal, state, local, that are also occupied in our EOC. We we have actually less seats than you have in our EOC, but we are constructing a brand new emergency operations center set to open up summer of 27. It'll increase our seating capacity to about 170 seats in that facility as well. We're looking forward to having that operational. I just want to throw kudos to you and comment about how much I appreciate the partners that you selected to be in here, because these are the partners we work with every day. Of the federal partners, NOAA and the National Weather Service are, I can probably speak for Clay on this as well, are our two primary federal partners. We rely on them on the daily basis. We have them on our cell phones, we call them at night, weekends and holidays, and they answer. And that's a testament to their commitment. Also from our partners from the Red Cross, with Paul, another great partner with our NGOs, and then Baldwin with FPL, our major critical utility partner as well.
Unfortunately, the partner missing is Florida Division of Emergency Management, who no longer sends anyone to this meeting.
That is correct, and we do work with them. We're fortunate that we have two regional reps, one for recovery and one response, that live in the region.
We would be fortunate if they started participating.
It would be great to see them. We saw them last week at the state when we were up there for an exercise, though. So we have the annual hurricane, our emergency preparedness readiness guide, like Clay and Broward County does, and other jurisdictions as well. One thing that we do is we mail this out to 1 million household residents in Miami-Dade County. It's a big lift for us to put this together.
Correct. Yeah.
So we put that together with input, and we have a lot of great information there. That information is also contained online as well as in our app, Ready MDC app, with updated information as well, including heat and flood information. So this is all right there at their fingertips. And this was an initiative that was spearheaded by Mayor Daniela Levine Cava when she was commissioner of Miami-Dade County. She was the one that said we need to develop this, and ultimately this led to the development of our app a couple of years ago as well. I want to highlight just here at closing that we also have a number of weather stations throughout Miami-Dade County as well. We have over a dozen. Broward has some as well. We had some funding through Florida Division of Emergency Management to install some others. They're really good hyper-local weather stations that provide information, real-time weather cameras, and up-to-date information on an app on the website. As you see there, this one we positioned at Zoo Miami. As you see in the background, yes, that is the lion exhibit. And yes, they got a lot closer than you actually think that they are. Yes, that is not Photoshop. They are a short little jump over that canal away from us. But we encourage our residents to visit these weather sim stations, also NWS, the National Hurricane Center, for up-to-date information, as well as what we're pushing out from emergency management and our mayor's office of public safety as well. Great partnerships all around. We're looking forward to advancing these programs as we continue. Lastly, in closing, I want to say that we're always prepared no matter what the circumstances are. This is a picture with our staff, and that is the former FEMA administrator, Leanne Criswell. She joined us last year when we received the CRS rating of 3, which ranks us in the top 5% of all those communities throughout the United States. We participated in the FEMA Emergency Manager Exchange Program last year. We got 2 people from FEMA for 6 months to help support our capacity and build our operations. We sent one of our team members up to DC to help support them as well. Great collaboration, great coordination, communication. It helps with feds knowing what we do at the local level, and here at the local level, what's going on at the federal. We hope that that program continues because we found value as a community. So that's my quick brief.
Thank you. And although I don't officially represent Miami-Dade County any longer, as you said, Dr. Spiro, we're a region, and I have many constituents who work in Miami-Dade County, need to know what your preparations are for their businesses or where they work, as well as where they live. So that's why we always ask you guys to continue to come.
Appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you both so much.
Absolutely. I have to apologize. I have to leave like Rob. We're gonna
Go right
be on a
ahead.
call with all 10,000 Baptist employees to the hurricane.
No worries.
Thank you.
We're all on top of this right now. Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, now we'll go to Lieutenant Commander Ryan Tagmeyer from the Florida National Guard, who is participating virtually. Commander? Are you with us? See the PowerPoint.
What? I'm texting.
Okay.
Is he up? Yes, that's it.
Well,
He's
Well,
trying
well,
to
while we're waiting, thank you very much. While we're waiting, I also want to thank Mayor Joy Cooper, Mayor of Hallandale Beach, and the entire team in Hallandale Beach who have consistently made their emergency operations center here available to us for this briefing, and we really appreciate their efforts.
Good morning, team. Can you hear me?
Morning, we can hear you now.
Oh, thank you so much. I apologize for those technical difficulties there. Congresswoman and Commissioner, on behalf of Major General Haas, thank you so much for having me on this morning. My name is Lieutenant Colonel Ryan Hagemeyer. I'm the J35 for the Florida National Guard, here to speak about our preparedness for this hurricane season. In the military, we like to use our acronyms and a bunch of letters and numbers smashed together to kind of represent different things. J35 is just a shortened way of saying I'm the Future Operations Officer for the Florida National Guard. So we primarily responsible for planning future operations and our response when it comes to domestic operations. So this morning we'll talk, here's a quick agenda. We'll talk about kind of who we are, what we do, our preparation for this season, as every season is unique, and then finally how we respond typically in a scenario. Okay, so here's a quick overview of Florida National Guard, where we are postured and positioned on a day-to-day basis. As you see, we don't have quite every county covered, but we do have 63 armories spread throughout the state of Florida. Those armories are home bases within jurisdictions and within counties and communities because we are and of the citizens of Florida, and that's how we're made up. Altogether, we're about 12,000 strong. That's between 4 major subordinate commands, or MSCs, our Joint Force Headquarters in St. Augustine, Florida, and of course our Air Fighter Wing, our Air National Guard. We have about 2,000 of them. So again, 12,000 strong going into on a year-to-year basis. That's where we're authorized at. And that number fluctuates depending on global mobilizations, federal duty, as well as any state missions that we have running. Training missions across the continent and outside the continental United States. That number will ebb and flow accordingly throughout different training years. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so this is a quick representation. What do we do during a domestic operation in response? We do a little bit of everything. Bottom line is we do what we're asked and what we can. That includes everything from humanitarian assistance and disaster relief or disaster recovery to firefighting. Of course, logistics is a huge capability and backbone that runs during a domestic operation. Command and control. We have a large Joint Force Headquarters that we typically run out of St. Augustine, Florida during any kind of hurricane or disaster response. We do have the capability of jumping over to Camp Blanding, which is just outside of Stark, Florida, if it looks like St. Augustine is going to receive a direct impact. And if we anticipate any disruption in command control, we'll jump over to Camp Blanding, Florida, over near Bradford County and Clay County. In addition, we also provide a robust communication support that we lend to the community and a CBRN, which is chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear disaster. We have a couple teams that are specifically geared towards that. Search and rescue up in the top right, you see there. I think many of us have seen the search and rescue teams. We kick those out. We stage them early and kick them out as soon as the storm clears to help our task forces, our state task forces with search and rescue as well. So a little bit of everything going around the horn there. Next slide, please. Okay, so as we get into 2025 preparations and kind of what we do to prepare for each season, as I alluded to previously, every season is a little bit different. But the events that we utilize to prepare for that, we try to keep in a steady battle rhythm. And some of those events you can see on the screen here. We attend the annual EMAC conference. That's a nationwide held in New Orleans typically each year. And that's where we go represented from each National Guard, which there's 54 of them, all the states and territories. And we all show up and we talk about capabilities that we're lacking for this year or capabilities that we have in excess that we believe we can help out with our surrounding states, regions, and partners, FEMA regions and partners. and we review each of our capabilities and our any gaps that we have, and we make deals then and there that say, hey, we have this available if you should need it. And that serves as those prior EMAC coordination pieces that allows us to start filling in those gaps that we've identified along the way. In addition to that, we hold multiple tabletop exercises, both nationally and then regionally, and then statewide as well across the state there. We take an all hazard approach, so not specifically hurricane response, but we also look at a great multitude of threats and factors to include civil unrest, any sea burn, as we talked about before, any sea burn threat, the whole myriad. We look at the National Guard as a tool for the state to use, the governor to use to get back on track and really help the communities when in need to be out there early and often. During our drill weekends, of course, as a tagline says, the National Guard drills 1 weekend a month and 2 weeks a year. I'm not quite sure when the last time was that I saw that low of operational tempo, but that's what we concentrate on regardless. We have our once a month drill weekends, and we really use those to concentrate on staff exercises or staff training in order to develop and those younger leaders and fill any seats that were vacated through retirements or prior people moving on with other careers. So we like to take a teach, coach, mentor approach to make sure that we have the expertise needed on a year-to-year basis. Army North does their tabletop exercise and coordination that we attend, as well as Northcom. We always attend with Northern Command as well. So all these events we use to maintain our proficiency going into the hurricane season. Interagency coordination there, you see the last bolded bullet point. We concentrate on interagency coordination, as we know we can't do what we do without our partners, and that goes into even what the Congresswoman's doing today in Holderness. And we have a full-time presence at the Florida Division of Emergency Management up in Tallahassee at the State Emergency Operations Center that plugs in there. And as I said, he is there on a day-to-day basis to represent the National Guard and keep his thumb on the pulse of what's going on and feed that information back into our Joint Force headquarters here in St. Augustine to keep us ready and prepared for anything that's coming up on the menu. Let's see, Lower Keys Medical Center annual training event, Monroe County. In fact, I think that's coming up pretty soon. We attend that regularly to focus on the region down there and make sure that we're ready for Keys evacuation as they, present a specific, unique problem set with the barrier islands. And then finally, we provide logistical support at the State Logistics Response Center in Orlando. And as we know, that's moving over to Polk County or there in Auburndale this year. So we'll have a hand in that as well. And during any response, we have a full-time presence there that's helping push those commodities out to the affected areas. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is a look at kind of what I was alluding to earlier. It's our capability gap analysis. And what this does, it gives a quick snapshot of what the Florida Guard will need based on type of storm. So drawing your attention over to the far left-hand side, Category 1, Category 2, the minor storms. You see there's mostly green there. The Florida National Guard is able to self-sustain on a minor storm. On the y-axis there on the left side, you see the different warfighting functions, we call them: command and control, transportation, communications, aviation, logistics, security, engineering. And that really helps us focus in on, hey, what do we need by type? And where do we need to flex those assets to? Category 3 is when we start looking at EMAC and surrounding it regional partners or states, and really nationwide, that, hey, who can come in and help us? And this is what we've identified that we'll need. For example, on the aviation side, we have a saying: you can never have too much aviation during a domestic response. they're the heroes, when it comes to commodities, firefighting, transportation, whatever. So, as the chart progresses into more and more serious storms and impacts, our adjutant general can use this, our planners can use this as a quick reference tool that say, okay, the storm is projected to hit at this category. We know we're going to need this. Let's start making those calls and getting those capabilities into the state so that we can continue to respond quickly to the needs of the state. Next slide, please. Thank you. And this is a EMAC time and space kind of coordination chart that breaks it down into what states different capabilities are coming from. And using the chart on the last slide, we then say, okay, we know we need aviation. That aviation assets, we've already worked with the state of Alabama. We know that they can provide 2 UH-60 Black Hawk helicopters. We know it takes them approximately 48 hours to get there. So that gives us a backwards planning timeline of when we need to start the process of getting these capabilities into the state. And we keep this on hand to inform our leaders and to really inform our exercise matrix and exercise timeline in order to force flow not only the capabilities of equipment, but also any soldiers and personnel that we need to come along with them. All right, next slide. Okay, this is a kind of how we look like and how we respond during a homeland response here in the state. Our commander-in-chief on a day-to-day basis is of course the governor, and that's in either a state active duty status or a Title 32 status. That governor on day-to-day basis, he's commander-in-chief with and exercises direct authority down to the adjutant general, Major General Haas. And you can see that depicted on the left side of the screen. And then from there, Major General Haas acts internally within the Florida National Guard, both on the Army side and the air side. Myself personally and the Director of Military Support, we fall in that DMA/Joint Force Headquarters, that green and blue slash. And that's why I have a J in front of my designator to indicate that our headquarters is a joint here at the Director of Military Affairs. And that's kind of on day-to-day status and also during state response. The right side of the chart shows a Title 10 or a federal response status. And with, of course, the president being the commander-in-chief, once we're federalized, all the way down through Secretary of Defense, Secretary of Army and Air Forces, down to Chief of Staff of the Army and Air Forces. You see Chief of National Guard Bureau, who is a member of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, with that dashed line over to the Adjutant General. That dashed line represents coordinating effort between National Guard Bureau and the state itself. Now, if there's a need, an emergent need, which you can see in the foreground there, that's again during a time of domestic response when the National Guard has been activated. The governor is the commander-in-chief. We operate through the state coordinating officer and coordinating capacity down to the tag, and we respond as necessary. So all this is the takeaway from this is the Guard is very flexible. Florida National Guard is very flexible in terms of how you can use us, what status you can use us in. But generally in domestic response capability, if it's a state-led response, we're going to be in a state active duty status for emergency aid. Okay, and next slide, please. Okay, so this reviews some of our standing orders, if you will, our standing operating procedures. The Guard goes in with the understanding that, hey, for 72 hours, we are focused on the life-saving aspect of response. We're focused on response, incident awareness, gathering that command awareness of what's going on, establishing that footprint, getting a firm grasp of what's needed in the area. After that, we tend to, at that 72-hour mark, we tend to transition to a recovery aspect rather than respond. But during that time, we're establishing communications with the impacted areas. First thing we do is go into the county EOCs and make contact with that emergency manager there, set up a presence and offer a liaison officer, an LNO, to the EM directly so that they can have a direct line to the guard in their community, in their county, and in their area. And we work in a support role. So we work with that EM directly and they are in charge and we work to meet the requests that they send up through WebEOC and comes back down through the SEOC and tasks ESF 13 straight back to us. So we help them bridge that gap there on ground so that we can lean forward and be as far forward as we need to be in order to meet those basic human needs. Speaking of that, you see that next bullet comment there. That's really the first objective we have going into the area. You know, making sure that people have medical assistance, they have the water, the food, the shelter necessary to stabilize and get on the road to recovery from response. Restoring critical infrastructure is something we work very hard to do. I spoke about communications assets earlier. During Hurricane Michael back in 2018, Bay County was completely dark, as we all remember, and the National Guard immediately dispatched with major communications assets to get the EOC up and running, get the communications up and running until we could bridge that gap and get them self-supporting to start that recovery effort. Opening schools and local businesses is always a priority, of course. We know that once schools get open and are ready to receive students back, that really frees up the parents to get back to work as well and get the economy back running, get the businesses back running. So we work hard to make sure that the schools in the community are ready and prepared to receive students. And of course, that goes with individual storm response and what we're able to do. Sometimes that takes a little longer than others, but that's always a pretty good indicator for us and how the disaster response and recovery is going based on those schools, local schools, and their projections for when they can get back up and running. And that, of course, as I said, stimulates the economy and serves as a good indicator for, hey, we're doing the right thing here. All those indicators for those first 24, 72 hours really push into the recovery phase. And once we're in the recovery phase, we try to get things to steady operations as much as possible, a steady state of operations. Whether that's point of distribution, you know, pods, running pods for as long as the community needs us, or distributing mobile food and water, or running air bridges back and forth of supplies, or you know, if we're in the shelter business for that county, then continue to run the shelters until volunteers or Red Cross can take over. Whatever the need may be, the Guard's going to be on for as long as the community needs us, and as long as the state of Florida calls on us to be there. And then next slide, please. Some considerations that are very important for us is the signing of that executive order, that emergency order. That's really what opens up the coffers for us, if you will, and allows us to place National Guard members on state active duty orders. The big takeaway there is the earlier the EO is signed, the earlier the executive order is signed, that allows us to begin movement on an official capacity. And as you saw on the previous slides, you know, depending on the size of the storm, there's a lot of lead time leading up to this, have the proper personnel and equipment in place in order to respond appropriately to the size of the disaster. I will say the state of Florida has been very good and has gotten better over the past 5 to 8 years of getting an early EO signed, which is huge for us. It allows us to move into those identified or projected counties that are going to be impacted by a storm and set up staging areas. Allows us to identify and start those conversations early with the local EOCs about any potential shortfalls they have or may have, or that they think that they are going to have, and allows us to get those LNOs into the community. It also allows us to establish a chain of command. Most of our guardsmen, I should say, we have a very small full-time force, but most of them are citizen soldiers. You know, that's the nature of the guard. So having that EO early allows them to communicate with their employers and come and establish that chain of command, even for senior leaders. And then, of course, prioritization of specialized equipment. As I said, aviation can never have too much of it. In the most recent storms last year with Debbie, Helene, and Milton, of course, our engineering assets became a huge we're in very much demand. There's some of the first units out the door to assist in debris removal and really route clearance to get those major arteries open and flowing so that not only traffic can flow, but really commodities can flow into that area, that affected area. We can get that logistical chain, supply chain established so that speed to need happens very quickly. So those are always considerations for us. One of the big things this year for us, of course, as I alluded to in the very first slide, our numbers fluctuate availability depending on federal exercises and deployments across the globe, as well as training exercises. Our largest major subordinate command is the 53rd Infantry Brigade Combat Team. And this year during July and August, they have a major training exercise out in Fort Irwin, California at the National Training Center. There's a very big combat training center, one of two in the continental United States. And they've worked and trained very hard to be successful out there. But that takes away a large chunk, quite frankly, our largest major subordinate command in the state for about a month between July and August. So we plan for that, we project that, and we work with our partners and regional and state partners to fill those capability gaps. Operation Vigilant Sentry is another operation that we'll have going on during hurricane season. That takes up a good chunk of soldiers and airmen and manpower. But again, we plan for that and prepare for that so that we can cover down appropriately. Of course, the Florida National Guard has been providing support to the state of Florida in other ways as well, on an ongoing basis. One of those ways is to Department of Corrections. We've been supporting DOC for the past 2 years now, actually. That mission comes to an end in end of June, so about a month here. We'll be ending that mission. But there's guardsmen on duty every day across the world. And the bottom line takeaway is we take that into consideration in force projection and force power. And we always try to, our motto is Florida first, as actually we can go to the last slide here. And we make sure that we can appropriately serve the citizens of Florida. And that's a pride that we take. We maintain what's known as the gold standard nationwide. Everybody looks to Florida, and we work hard to maintain that reputation because we know it only takes one storm and one slip up to lose it. So we're very much focused on speed to need and providing for the citizens of Florida in a time of need. Thank you very much. I'll ask to go to the last slide to display points of contact, and I'll pause here for any questions or comments.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your service and the service of your fellow guardsmen and women. Can you tell me, does the Florida National Guard currently have any of our troops stationed on the border?
No, ma'am, not currently. We, on a rotational basis, we have sent troops out there before, and we have a couple federal mobilizations coming up, but not currently any troops on the southwest border.
Are there any plans to deploy Guard members from Florida to the border?
Yes, ma'am. In the out years, I believe there's a southwest border rotation coming up. I'll have to double check, but I believe it's in FY 27.
Okay. Okay, I asked because obviously that would affect the strength of the Guard and our ability to respond to hurricanes, so.
Yes, ma'am.
Or natural disasters. So for this hurricane season, there aren't plans to deploy Florida National Guard members to the southwest border, which is not in our state.
Correct.
Yeah, okay, just wanted to make sure. The pending and current Department of Defense cuts, have any of those cuts affected funding for the Guard? Any administrative cuts? I realize the Guard's funded by the state, but any cuts impacting the Florida Guard coming from DOD?
Not directly, ma'am. The funding cuts typically affect the National Guard Bureau first, and then the trickle-down effect, the state usually sees or realizes those effects through the out years in the budget years. We have been experiencing some budgetary impacts to our technician force, our military technician force, which is part of our full-time force. But when it comes to the budgetary cuts, we fully expect those to have some impact. But as I said, typically those run through National Guard Bureau at the national level before they trickle down to the states.
So have we lost military technicians as a result of the DOD budget cuts?
Yes, ma'am, we have at this point.
How many?
How
many out of how many?
Yeah, I'll have to get that data point and get back to you, Congresswoman.
Okay.
I don't want to speak out of turn there, but I'll certainly make a note here to get that back to you after I get with our human HRO office, our personnel office.
Thank you. Okay. And then are those, that's from funds that were already appropriated by Congress
Yes, ma'am.
for those positions? Okay. So those cuts are currently in dispute in terms of potential impoundment. Okay. And then if the threshold for disaster declaration changes, some numbers are coming out as high as quadrupling, and Florida has a storm hit us that doesn't meet the increased threshold, how will that affect the National Guard, our National Guard's ability to respond in a storm, and also the potential reimbursement
Yes.
if any is necessary?
Yes, ma'am. That's a great question. I appreciate the opportunity to speak about that a little bit. So, as you know, Congresswoman, once the storm meets a federal threshold for reimbursement, those dollars captured for any operational costs associated with equipment is reimbursed, but it goes back to the Department of Defense, and so the bridging the reimbursement from the Department of Defense back down to specifically the state of Florida has been a process that is not smooth, and that we're working on. I say we, the Florida National Guard, along with other states, other National Guards, have been pushing as a priority in Congress to have access to those reimbursement funds to maintain our equipment that we've utilized during responses.
And how long has that been going on for?
I don't know the answer to that question. I would have to get it with our legislative affairs to get that.
A recent development or a longer term problem?
Longer term, yes, ma'am. Longer term problem.
Okay, yeah, if you could get back to me, and whether those would be exacerbated by the proposed cuts, or any cuts, if any cuts occur.
Okay, will do.
Great, thank you. Okay, no other questions? Oh, go ahead.
Well, this
Yeah.
doesn't affect me as a municipality. I'm just curious, how many of your guardsmen are filling in at the Department of Corrections? And is this something that you're doing during your one weekend a month, or is this something you're doing in addition to?
Yes, ma'am. This is something we're doing in addition to. So these guardsmen are on orders and on duty. Currently for the Department of Corrections, we have 66 total Army and Air Army soldiers and Air National Guardsmen that are supporting Department of Corrections. So that number has continued to wane as this mission is winding down to a close. But yes, ma'am, those are Florida Guardsmen that are on duty on a day-to-day basis that supplement Department of Corrections.
So how is that being budgeted?
That's coming through the state budget. Yes, ma'am.
And is that being budgeted in an overtime capacity? Is that being budgeted through your budget? Is that being as a supplemental? Is that like a TDY to them?
It's a named operation for us through Department of Corrections, so I don't want to speak out of turn, but it's tied to an emergency order, executive order, in order to fill those billets and bring those guardsmen on orders.
So does the state do not, why can't we fill this?
The governor makes deployment decisions. So if he's made a deployment decision to detail the National Guard to the State Department of Corrections, that's his prerogative. Just like it was his prerogative to put members of our National Guard troops on the southwest border.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, thank you. Sorry to ask that question.
That's okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you, Colonel. Appreciate your service and thank you for all the work that you do.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Last but not least, we'll have our Red Cross and the FPL report, and then we'll have an opportunity to talk to our friends in journalism. Baldwin English with FPL, and welcome and nice to meet you.
Thank you for the opportunity.
The new Ben Wesley.
The new Ben Wesley, not improved, just the new. So time is well spent. I think everyone here has been through this type of presentation with us before, so I'll just touch on the highlights, I believe, here. So what I want, and I'm skipping one here, I would like to say that in terms of preparing for this season and seasons to come, we have invested many billions of dollars into the grid to strengthen the grid, underground, hardened, and so forth. In Broward County specifically, all of our transmission structures have been hardened. And 90% of our feeder lines, the main lines that run up and down 441, Broward Boulevard, and so forth, 90% of those have been hardened as well. And we're about 65% through with undergrounding our lateral lines here in Broward County. And those undergrounded lines have performed about 40% better than above ground lines. So we're still in the process of doing that. From a statewide level, it's probably going to be about 20 years before we get everything that we'd like to get undergrounded, right?
Okay.
And that's going to take some time.
How much? What's the process around the county for that timetable?
What is the process?
Well, I mean, like for example, Weston, everything was when Weston was built, everything
was mostly there's a pocket there,
yeah,
right?
Bonaventure side of that.
Right. So I mean, it's that's data driven. So depends on how lines do this year. Then we'll get to design and outreach next year for construction the following year. So it's kind of a rotating basis.
So can you give me a sense of what percentage of the lines that are above ground still are going to be buried each year that's in your
I wouldn't be able to, but it's literally year to year. So I mean, in terms of
you said it's going to take 20 years. That's an incredibly long time. So
statewide, yes.
Statewide. Okay, how about so let me zero in on Broward County. How long will it take to bury
Zero in on City? I'm closer.
Yeah. I'll pause. To do Broward County.
It's difficult because we can't list it by county. It's literally done by line, as it were. Mm-hmm. So you may have areas in Broward County that are performing very well that may be pushed back further in the process than others in Miami or Palm Beach County. That are
so if you're not having as many challenges, in a sense, if you're not having as many challenges with power outages and the length of time it takes to get people back online, then another community could come.
That's absolutely correct.
Okay.
So we should cut lines.
No,
As you know, Century Village has had, the one in Pembroke Pines, which is the one I represent, has had very significant problems in the past with their power outages, the length of time it takes them to get back online, how soon FPL prioritizes them. So I am hopeful that plans include being able to make sure that the area that serves them, where you serve them, is addressed.
I live near there. I was not aware that there were issues before new to this area from
Yeah.
Miami, so I just know.
It's ongoing issues.
Okay. I will try. We still have Ben on consultation fee, so I'll reach out to Ben to get
Okay.
the history so I can
Absolutely.
figure out
He
what
can
the
bring you up
plan
to
is.
speed.
Yeah, that's sure.
I have two questions.
Yes, ma'am.
See how your man is up there?
Yes.
So you have very, large amounts of wire that, all not shown in that picture, but when you're on a pole, you'll see that if you drive by, there are some poles that have just massive amounts of wire that's just in loops on your poles. And then a lot of times, whatever circle is holding those loops together will break, and then that wire falls. So I'm wondering just why FPNL has those loops of wire that's circled. I don't know what it's called, so I'll just tell you whatever it is.
Sure.
Like a lasso of wire.
Right.
So why you have that, like what purpose it serves, and if you don't need it, can you please get rid of it?
Right.
Because when they break, it's a hazard, and I worry about it. And I see them throughout my city.
Right.
So if you can get rid of them, I would appreciate that. That's number one. And go ahead.
I was going to answer that.
Okay.
The picture I have in my mind of that kind of loop wire is generally not FPL infrastructure.
Oh, it's on your pole.
It's on our pole, but we share our poles with communication lines, Comcast, AT&T, whatever the case may be. So I have not seen where it's electrical wires that are looped like that. In my mind, what I'm envisioning are communication wires that are attached to our poles that will usually ride a little bit lower than our electrical lines that are looped. I don't know if they're in the middle of doing something and they just kind of do that as a temporary measure. I wouldn't be able to speak to why they're like that, but ours would not be looped up. Hopefully, yes, ma'am.
And then you all are putting new poles in my city. Right now, you're on 90th Avenue, putting new poles. So if you are, and I know you just said you're burying your lines.
Right.
If you're in the process of burying your lines, why are you going through, in my city, I'll just use that as an example, why are you going through putting new poles if you're burying them? Why not just bury them instead of putting the poles?
So the lines that we are burying are the lateral lines. We call them lateral lines. They're neighborhood lines, more locally. Usually they're the lines that run behind homes. We may be hardening feeder lines that are more major lines that are kind of the backbone of these lateral lines that come off of it, right? So I would need to know which line that is.
The lines that you're replacing the poles on are on 90th Avenue, which is.
We have feeder line, which is not going to be undergrounded forward.
So can I interrupt?
Sure, please.
And I apologize. So logically, to
Yes.
me, and I don't know electrical anything other than plug it in, it works.
Sure.
So if you're going to bury one and not another, then if a storm hits, if one is buried and one is not,
Right. Understand.
they're going to break, and I'm not going to have power, and I'm not going to have air conditioning. My husband's going to be cranky.
Yeah.
So why not bury them all? You're laughing, but it's the truth. Why not bury them all?
I would be cranky as well. All right, so we have three different types of lines. Out of our generating assets, we have transmission lines that run 30, 40, 50 feet in the air. They're huge.
Right, I know what
Right.
the transition box.
Drop into substations. Out of that come the feeder lines, which you're referring to. Those are also going to be set generally higher and on the main roads, generally away from vegetation that can impact it. And then those drop from those come those are neighborhood lines. The neighborhood lines are the target for undergrounding because those are the ones that are generally impacted by vegetation. And those are the ones that generally cause the problems when we have outages and so forth. So in theory, we could underground the feeder lines as well, but that cost proposition does not justify the benefit that we would get from it because it would be nominal at that point in time. Because the main problem is vegetation behind people's homes that are not maintained that impact our lines that cause all of the outages. Good.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. No
That
problem.
makes sense then. I'll give you that.
Okay, all right. So we talked a lot about what happened last year with Helene and Milton, and we were able to get substantially all of our customers back on in 3 or 5 days, respectively. I say substantially or essentially because there were some homes that were, we could not restore power because they were just not prepared for that. I'm going to skip through a bunch of these because we've seen a lot of that. A couple of weeks ago, we finished our annual storm drill. If you looked at my phone, or we were sitting in a meeting 2 weeks ago, my phone, you would think that the world was coming to an end, right? Because we go through this process where we're enacting as if there was a major hurricane that has hit the state and so forth. So we do that every year just to make sure that our processes are working. If we've instituted a new process, we want to make sure that that's working fine. Our communication, we test our sat phones, we do all of those things to ensure that we're able to restore power as quickly as possible. This just tells you we serve half the state, bunch of people, lots of transformers, lots of infrastructure there, right? Am I going backwards? I'm supposed to be going down? This seems weird. All right, I'm gonna get it. So in terms of preparation, again, 6 million smart meters and a lot of other smart devices throughout our grid helped us avoid about 800,000 outages just last year. So that investment that we've made into the smart devices all throughout our system has paid off.
Hardening your poles too.
Hardening the poles, definitely.
Big
Definitely.
help.
That's been a huge, huge help. No more, you don't see those snapped wooden poles like you would see back in the day, right? I've heard a couple of people mention aviation and, being able to look from the top down. And we have certainly deployed basically a whole new business, FPL Air, and we have a lot of drones that we utilize in the system. In Broward County, we are actually deploying 7 drones in various substations that can help us walk the line, as it were, make sure that the lines are prepared, the air is prepared for us to be able to restore power quickly. Back in the day, the olden days in the 1900s, people would have to literally walk the line and just make sure that and so now we do with the airline with these drones, and we're able to restore power much quicker. This is essentially our EOC that we have in Juneau, beautiful facility. If you've never taken a tour there, it's beautiful. I'd love to take you on a storm tour that they do. They did it about 3 weeks ago. So if you've never been there, we can plan for next year when it's fully functioning. We obviously work with our local county officials to identify critical infrastructure to get it back on quickly as possible. State like where we are, 911 centers, major roadways, and so forth. You've seen many times on television or if you're driving on the road, hundreds of trucks driving to be prepared. They're prepared about 96 hours before a storm is supposed to hit landfall. So we rely on our partners in the meteorology space to help us identify where to deploy those assets. I talked about kind of the lines that we have here, and our goal is, in this slide, the point of this slide is to just ensure that our goal is to get as many people back online as quickly as possible. So in your area, Madam Congresswoman, you have a high density area, those areas will probably come back on first as opposed to, a home that has 5 acres, right? Because you're gonna have less impact with our storm restoration efforts. So we work 24 hours until everyone is restored. We certainly encourage everyone to go and visit fpl.com/storm for really some of the information you've shared that's been shared here today in terms of storm preparation. We have a multitude of ways to communicate with all of our clients. The one thing I would stress, I tell people every time, is get the app. Get the app. The app is your best friend, right? And certainly the website for our general customers, our public, and we also have a storm portal that only becomes active around, before, and during a storm, named storm. So your office staff will probably have access to that for both of you during those important times. So I wanted to rush through as quick as
Thank
possible
you.
and just
Thank you.
leave
No, that's
space
really
for any
helpful.
questions.
It's always good to know that, future plans of the BL so that we can start to continue to shrink the length of time that people inevitably deal with outages.
Yes, ma'am.
So thank you very much. Okay, Paula Pendergrass, yes, the Red Cross, last but not least. Exactly.
I know. There we go. So as you know, we work very well with Broward County and emergency and Miami-Dade emergency management teams. We've offered to provide shelter training should they need it, both virtual and in person. We're doing pretty much the same assistance as we did last year. Pre-storm in Broward, 7 shelters, 2 post-storm, and in Miami-Dade, it's going to be 8 shelters pre-landfall and 1 post-storm. And once the, depending on the scope and scale of the size of the storm, we will work closely with them to determine what shelters we're going to do post-storm that will be managed by the American Red Cross. We also do shelter simulations, drills all year round. So our biggest one is coming up June 12th. It's going to be in West Palm Beach. And as you know, you took the tour in the Deerfield Beach Logistics Center. I would love to give you a tour, Commissioner. It's awesome. It's 8,000 square feet, all disaster relief supplies, and it really helps us respond efficiently in the 13 counties. And I can just say, I knew I was going to be last. Our teams are ready. We're here with all of our partners. It's like a family every year. And should we be called upon, we're definitely here to support. So.
Thank you very much. We really appreciate it. I know you're a nearly all volunteer operation, and the support that you provide to our community, especially when people are at the end of their rope, is so critical. So thank you very, very much. Well, thank you all so much. Thank you for the intrepid folks who were able to stay to the end. This hurricane briefing is always so incredibly important. It gives me an opportunity to get an update on behalf of my constituents, and we've live streamed this today, and we had good press coverage as well, to make sure that people understand that they absolutely must get ready in advance of the start of hurricane season. So this is May 28th. The first day of hurricane season officially is 3 days from now, and you should have your go kits ready. You should have your 72 hours, really up to a week's worth of some supplies already stocked in your home. I'm in the process of sending out my annual hurricane mailer, which has that checklist that you can tear off, put on your refrigerator so you have it available with the phone numbers, as well as the list of items that these incredible organizations and agencies recommend that you do to prepare. Don't wait. That's the bottom line. I mean, especially in these really uncertain times, in terms of the standards that are going to be applied, particularly in the aftermath of a storm, and we don't know where we're going to be in terms of assistance that is provided at the federal level under this administration. Making sure that you're prepared in advance to sustain yourself as long as possible is going to be really even more important than usual. So thank you to our intrepid public servants, and we appreciate your work so much, and thank you to everyone for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you to Commissioner Malone.